The story takes place in a regular old school, specifically in the cafeteria. We find our main character passed out at a table until his buddy shows up with 2 trays of food. The chubby friend tries to wake the guy up, telling him he brought him lunch. He figures Gavin is wiped out from staying up late talking to some girl. Slowly waking up, our guy wonders where that amazing smell is coming from. Then he realizes the smell is coming from the food right in front of him. Gavin immediately perks up and lets out a shout, and then he starts staring at the food, his eyes sparkling. Without a second thought, the kid starts devouring everything like a wild animal. His concerned friend tells him to eat slower so he doesn't choke, but it was too late, and our protagonist devours his friend's food too. After stuffing his face, he lets out a sigh of relief and says he's finally back. He can't believe he was actually reborn. His buddy asks if he was some kind of hungry ghost since he ate his portion too. Gavin then confirms that he really was reincarnated from a hungry ghost. He was in a frozen apocalypse, and there, he ended up starving. The chubby friend is completely lost and thinks he's acting this way because his girlfriend dumped him. Then the protagonist puts a hand on his friend's shoulder and says he's happy he's still alive because now they can start over. Yahello is freaked out by what Gavin said and replies that of course he's alive. The protagonist then asks for the date and his friend answers that it's August 8th, 2024. Gavin reveals that in half a month, the world will enter an ice age with temperatures of -50 degrees Fahrenheit. But Yahello thinks that's ridiculous and offers to help if his friend is in trouble. The protagonist says he needs help, and the chubby friend says he can count on him. Just then, Gavin asks to borrow $1 billion, and his buddy spits out his drink. Yahello, in disbelief at the absurd request, asks if he's serious, and our guy confirms. The protagonist's friend immediately refuses, saying he couldn't get kind of cash even if he sold his own dad. Completely shameless, Gavin asks how much he'd sell his dad for, and he replies 500 million, but after realizing what he just said, he gets mad at our guy. Suddenly, a couple shows up, and the guy invites the girl to a private room. Our protagonist then looks at them with a serious face, and the blonde guy says that after dinner, they're heading to a private movie theater. The chubby friend gets angry and points out that that's the protagonist's girlfriend, and she's cheating on him with another dude. With that, the couple walks right past the two of them. The embarrassed girl asks what her boyfriend is doing there. Yahello stands up for his friend and calls the redhead out on how ungrateful she is, but the girl doesn't even care and says she's not going to explain anything since it's pretty obvious. At this, the protagonist remembers that during the apocalypse, the blonde guy abandoned her, and he took her in. He treated her like a goddess, but the ungrateful girl betrayed him, and it was her fault he didn't make it. Yahello wants to leave, but Gavin calmly says there's no need to rush. The chubby friend doesn't get it and says just looking at her makes him sick. The blonde guy takes the chance to mock him, calling him a simp who follows Xenia around. Then the redhead humiliates our protagonist, saying he was harassing her and that she finds him disgusting. Gavin asks if she's done with her little show. The blonde guy scoffs, asking if Gavin is going to use his simp ways to try and win the girl back. Yahello tries to pull his friend away, but he asks for just 5 more minutes. The chubby friend gets desperate and doesn't understand why his buddy is so hung up on that girl. Zach finds it amusing and says he'd love to see what he can do in 5 minutes. Without even thinking twice, the protagonist slaps him right across the face. The redhead is shocked and worries about her new boyfriend. Everyone in the place has their jaws on the floor. Furious Zach asks how he dares to hit him. The playboy then lunges at the protagonist, shouting that he's gonna finish him, but Gavin is faster and lands a solid kick on him. Yahello gets all hyped up by his friend's new attitude, and the girl runs to help her boyfriend, who's on the ground. She then threatens her ex, saying he's a dead man for touching the hair of the dragon group. Zach then gets up and says he's a black belt in Taekwondo and refuses to lose to a punk like him, but our protagonist hits back with an uppercut and calls him trash. Gavin thinks that the apocalypse was a disaster, but it also taught him how to fight. At that moment, the chubby friend asks since when his buddy got so tough. The traitor is furious with the protagonist and yells that he'll regret this, and she even has the audacity to tell Gavin to get on his knees and apologize. Out of patience, Gavin slaps her across the face and asks who she thinks she is. Zach gets up, filled with rage, and promises he'll crush the protagonist like an ant. Gavin then knees him right in the stomach and pulls something from inside the guy's jacket. He holds up a spray can that he took from his pocket. Zach panics and tells him to give it back. The protagonist asks how many girls he's hurt using that spray. Zach plays dumb and tries to grab the object back, but Gavin is quicker and sprays it right in his face. The blonde guy starts screaming in pain, and Xenia has no idea what's going on. Desperate, Zach tells the girl to get away from him and stay far away. The spray then starts to take effect, and he goes after the girl, completely out of his mind. He then starts tearing at her dress in front of everyone. Xenia desperately tries to cover herself, saying they're in public, but Zach continues his attack, and the girl cries out for help. The protagonist announces that the 5 minutes are up, and the chubby friend is shocked by the scene. Gavin explains that it was a powerful aphrodisiac the rich kid used on his victims. Yahello worries that Zach will call the cops, but the protagonist tells him not to worry, because as the heir of the dragon group, he's too proud and will want to get his revenge personally. The chubby friend gets the logic and agrees that Zach will want to handle this secretly. Leaving the cafeteria behind, Yahello asks where they're heading next, and the protagonist says they're going to sell the house. Without wasting any time, the two go straight to a real estate agency. The chubby friend says that's the only thing his parents left him, but Gavin is determined to sell. With 3 million, he needs to stock up on as many supplies as possible for the apocalypse. Yahello doesn't understand the rush since house prices are going up, but the protagonist ignores him and calls him to their next stop, because now it's time to spend some cash, and their destination is a giant supermarket. As soon as they get there, he orders 1,000 bags of rice, flour, and oil, and to top it off, he also asks for 10,000 cans of canned food. The employee is stunned by the order and asks if he's sure. Gavin confirms, and the chubby friend asks if he's opening his own grocery store. The protagonist asks if they deliver, and the employee says they'll take care of everything. Then our guy remembers that Yahello's family owns a warehouse. He asks to borrow the warehouse and says he's still going to buy more stuff. Two girls from their class see him and start gossiping about the cheating incident. Ignoring them, Gavin heads to the electronics section and places more orders. He thinks that in the apocalypse, entertainment will be essential for passing the time. The employee is overjoyed and calls him the biggest customer of the year. The girls are shocked by how much money he's spending and wonder how he has so much cash. The protagonist then continues his shopping and asks for more coats to be packed up. The purple-haired girl gets suspicious and asks if he's really poor since he's already spent $1 million. They then conclude that he's a rich kid in disguise and decide to go talk to him. The protagonist thinks he's ready for the apocalypse as the two girls approach. One of them greets him with a super friendly smile. They start with some phony small talk and compliment our protagonist's looks, faking interest. He remembers that in the past, these two were thugs who robbed him in the cold. The girl then invites him to get something to eat. To their surprise, he accepts and asks Yahello to take the groceries to the warehouse. The gold diggers celebrate and already start planning to take their sugar daddy to an expensive restaurant. The protagonist then goes with the two of them, saying he's starving. The trio then arrives at a fancy building. They show off the place, commenting on how it's a very expensive luxury restaurant. Once inside, one of them asks what he thinks of the food. Looking at the menu, the protagonist pretends that he finds everything very expensive. The girls don't care about the price and say they'll order if he doesn't want to. Then the one with glasses orders several expensive dishes like caviar, lobster, and prime steak. An hour later, the purple-haired girl was satisfied with the feast. She then asks how the food was, and he says he's gonna step out for a bit. Gavin then goes straight to the restaurant's front desk. The hostess informs him that the bill is $18,000, but he ignores her and asks them to prepare 100 tables with the same dishes for pickup in 10 days. The receptionist is shocked by the huge order and asks if he's serious. Gavin then offers his VIP card and says he can pay for everything up front. He thinks about how sick he got of canned food in the apocalypse and wants to secure some good meals. The gold diggers think he's a cheapskate but sensible for going to pay the bill and already plan to ask him for some expensive purses later. The receptionist confirms the huge order but says there's still the bill for their table. However, he takes his card back and says they can pay their own bill. He thinks that he's spent almost all his money and now needs to get some loans. Without wasting time, he starts looking up some apps on his phone. He then celebrates getting almost 3 million in loans, but he still wants more. Suddenly, his phone rings and it's one of the gold digger girls calling. The angry girl asks where he went. The protagonist says something came up and he's already heading home and asks why he should pay the bill. The girl explodes with anger, saying he was the one who invited them to eat, but our guy retorts that they were the ones who dragged him there and ordered everything. They get desperate with the massive bill and don't know what to do, but he reminds them that he warned them about the price and they insisted on the most expensive dishes. Furious, the scammer calls him a broke loser and says he's a disgrace. So, to prove he has money, Gavin tells her to ask the hostess about the 100 table order, and the receptionist confirms it. With the confirmation, the girl begs him to come back and pay the bill, but the protagonist hangs up on her and says he's not going to baby some idiots. With no money to pay the bill, the two of them panic as the receptionist pressures them. The purple-haired one decides to call someone named Hunter to teach the protagonist a lesson. After leaving the restaurant, Gavin stops in front of a lottery shop. He remembers that in his past life he won the lottery with 5 numbers. With the ticket in his hand, he gets excited because he just has to wait 2 days for the results. With that, the protagonist returns to the warehouse where his friend is waiting. The chubby friend complains about being abandoned, but his buddy promises to take him out for some fun. Yahello still doesn't understand the point of spending so much money on supplies. Gavin explains that all of it will save lives in the apocalypse and asks him to trust him. The friend says he doesn't believe any of it because it sounds crazy, but the protagonist assures him that in a few days, he'll believe everything. Suddenly, a group of thugs shows up and asks for Gavin Clark. The guy confirms it's him and asks if they're the so, called Hunter's Goons. A bald guy with a baseball bat accuses him of messing with the boss's woman. The chubby friend gets scared and threatens to call the police if they try anything, but the thug just scoffs and says he'll break their legs before the cops get there. But the protagonist says with a smile that there's no need to call the police. The bald guy mocks him, calling him a coward and saying it would be useless anyway. The chubby friend tries to protect the guy by using his father's name, but the thug says their target is only Gavin and they won't touch the rich kid. Desperate, the friend tells the protagonist to run while he tries to hold the guy's back. One of the goons shoves the chubby friend and the bald guy swings the baseball bat. Yahello screams his friend's name in terror. However, our hero easily dodges and says the attack was way too slow. He then counters with a kick right to the gut, leaving the bald guy completely wrecked. Then, Gavin picks up the bat from the ground and hits him with full force. With the thug on the ground, the protagonist shoves the bat in his mouth. Seeing this, the other goons are shocked by the MC's strength. He then turns to the thugs and challenges them all to come at him at once. The blonde guy gets ticked off and orders his men to attack the protagonist. Our guy then takes down all the goons by himself. The chubby friend's jaw drops, unable to believe this is the same Gavin. With all the enemies on the floor, the protagonist asks if they've had enough, but Gavin demands 100,000 from each of them as compensation, and the thug says that's extortion. Gavin then whacks him with the baseball bat, and then threatens to break everyone's legs if they don't pay up quickly. With that, he gets 600,000 from the thugs. He thinks that he's not a cruel person, but the apocalypse changed his mindset. He then says he's going to take his friend to that exciting place he promised, and they arrive at a club full of dancing women. The rascal seems to be enjoying it a lot and thanks the protagonist for calming his nerves. Gavin goes to the bar and says he's looking for the boss to make a delivery. They are then led down a hallway full of security guards. The friend gets scared and asks what kind of excitement this is and what they're doing in this strange place. The security guards start saluting their boss, calling him Mr. Lowe. The boss then asks what the boys are doing there. With a smile, the protagonist introduces himself and says he heard the old man was receiving some goods. Mr. Lowe finds it strange that they're empty-handed and asks where the products are. Gavin points to himself and says that they are the goods, which piques the old man's interest. But the conversation ends, and the boss orders his armed goons to capture the pair. With guns pointed at them, the chubby friend panics and tries to use his dad's name to get out of there. Desperately, he asks what this delivery is, and Gavin reveals that the guy traffics human organs. Upon hearing this, the chubby friend completely loses it and screams that there's no way not to panic at that news. The protagonist then challenges the boss, asking if he's scared to close the deal. With that, he makes his offer 10 million for all the organs in his body. But the old man only offers 5 million, saying the market is down at the moment. The protagonist accepts on the condition that he gets the cash first and delivers the body in 3 days. Satisfied, the boss tells a goon to bring the contracts for them to sign, but they only bring one contract, and Gavin points to his friend, and the chubby guy yells that he's not selling anything, but the protagonist insists that his friend is selling, making him even more desperate. One of the goons then forces the chubby friend to sign the contract at gunpoint. Once outside, the furious friend asks if the protagonist is even human for selling him out. He tries to calm his friend down, and the chubby guy reminds him that this low guy is a dangerous gang boss. Gavin gets serious and says that in 3 days, that trafficking boss will be history. The friend doesn't believe him, but the protagonist invites him to watch the apocalypse arrive. They go to a mansion, and the protagonist says he wants to rent the property. The real estate agent confirms if it's just that one mansion, and he says yes. The friend doesn't understand why they're renting a mansion now, but Gavin says there's something good there. He remembers that it was in that mansion that he passed away in his previous life. Determined, he declares that his new life will begin in the same place where his old one ended. The agent informs him that the owner doesn't want to rent, but the young man offers double the price. Even with an offer of 5 times the rent, the woman says it's not a matter of money. Not giving up, the protagonist offers 10 times the price and payment up front. The agent changes her mind on the spot and promises to convince the owner no matter what. The protagonist says his only condition is that he can renovate the entire house. In the hallway, they see the guy's ex-girlfriend with her mother, who is encouraging her to win Zach over. The friend wonders what Xenia is doing there, and Gavin reveals that Zach has a mansion nearby. The raidhead notices her ex's presence and gives him a look of disgust. She accuses him of stalking and says they still haven't settled the score from last time. The girl's mother butts in and humiliates the protagonist, calling him a poor guy with no future. The chubby friend defends his buddy, and the woman freaks out, threatening to get him expelled from school. Gavin scoffs at the top reaction and asks what his rental has to do with her. The ex-girlfriend doubts he has money for the rent, which costs at least 20,000. The agent returns and informs them that the rent came out to 25,000 a month. The girl's mother is shocked to learn that the poor guy actually rented the mansion. The raidhead thinks he did all that just to be near her, and tells him to give up. The protagonist and his friend can't believe the girl's level of delusion. Her mother says that 25,000 is nothing and drags him away. The agent reminds him that the first month's rent will be 250,000, and he agrees to pay right away. The mother and daughter are in shock at his offer, and the redhead thinks it's all an act. The protagonist shows the transfer receipt for 250,000 on his phone. The agent hands over the keys to the mansion and says he can renovate it however he wants. The girl's mother wonders if she misjudged the guy and if he's also from a wealthy family. The protagonist asks his friend if he knows the boss of the biggest renovation company in the city. He asks his friend to set up a meeting, and the chubby guy doesn't understand the plan to renovate a rented house. Gavin tells him to stop asking questions and set up the meeting, promising he'll understand everything by tonight. The friend manages to schedule the meeting using his father's influence, and the protagonist thanks him. He promises to send a truckload of instant noodles as a thank you, and the friend complains. The guy assures him that his dad will love the gift and will even praise him for it. They arrive at the renovation company, and the receptionist asks them to wait for the boss. Coincidentally, the ex-girlfriend and her mother are also there for a renovation paid for by Zach. The redhead asks if the two have an appointment and then notices they're there. She once again accuses the protagonist of stalking and tells him to keep dreaming if he thinks he's going to win her over. Our guy is getting sick of running into these two and wonders why they keep bumping into these idiots. The chubby friend tries to explain that Gavin is also there for a renovation, but the redhead scoffs at him. The protagonist introduces himself to the receptionist and says he has an appointment. The mother and daughter doubt he's really there for a renovation and think he's just showing off. The company's boss arrives and asks who he has a meeting with. The receptionist points to the protagonist's group, but the two gold diggers cut in. The girl's mother is ecstatic and thinks that Zach's influence made the boss come personally. She takes the opportunity to humiliate the protagonist, saying her daughter gets to meet the boss while he has to wait. The redhead confidently goes to greet Mr. Zhao, introducing herself. The boss is confused and asks if she's scheduled an appointment with him. The girl gets worked up and says yes, but the man doesn't seem to recognize her. He asks if her name is Gavin Clark, and she replies that her name is Xenia. Mr. Zhao pushes her aside and tells her not to get in the way if she's not Gavin. The protagonist introduces himself, and the company boss recognizes him immediately. Surprised that he's so young, the boss invites him to talk in private. The girl's mother is completely baffled, and the redhead thinks it's all because of the rich friend's family. They enter the manager's office to discuss the renovation details. Mr. Zhao asks what the young man Gavin wishes to renovate. The protagonist says he wants to renovate a mansion. The boss explains that a mansion renovation is a small job and passes it on to a director, but Gavin insists that Mr. Zhao handle the project personally. The man says he's busy and only takes on large projects himself. The young man states that his is a large project, and the boss asks what the budget is. The protagonist then says the budget is at least 30 million. Mr. Zhao is floored by the amount and can barely believe what he heard. He asks if the young man is sure it's 30 million and not 3. The protagonist confirms the amount, and a director enters the room, excited to help with the project, but the boss dismisses him and says he'll handle it personally. Zhao asks what Gavin wants to do with so much money, since that's enough to buy a new mansion. The protagonist hands him a roll of paper and says the project blueprints are in there. Upon seeing the drawings, Mr. Zhao is startled and asks if he's building a bunker. Gavin says the budget can increase and that the only requirement is to finish in half a month. The boss says the project is complex and looks like a war bunker for the apocalypse. Gavin confirms that it is for the apocalypse and offers 20 million up front. Mr. Zhao accepts the challenge and promises to mobilize all resources to finish on time. The chubby friend is shocked by the 35 million expenditure and calls him crazy. The protagonist says money will be worthless soon, and his friend asks where the cash came from. He reveals he took out 10 million in loans, and his friend hopes the apocalypse story is real. The ex-girlfriend reappears and mockingly asks how much he spent to get attention. The guy gets irritated and says it's none of her business, and that he's not trying to get anyone's attention. The girl's mother boasts that her daughter spent 1 million and says that's real power. The chubby friend chimes in and reveals that Gavin spent 35 million. The redhead and her mother burst out laughing, thinking it's a ridiculous joke. The protagonist challenges them, asking if they'd call him daddy if it were true. The ex-girlfriend says he sold his house for 3 million and calls him a simp. The girl's mother joins the bet and says she'll call him daddy if he really spent that much cash. An employee runs after the protagonist, telling him he forgot his contract. Seizing the opportunity, the girl's mother grabs the paper to expose his lie, but as she looks at the amount on the contract, her expression changes, and she's left in shock. The redhead then scoffs and asks if the amount is so small it left her speechless. With a pale face, the mother stammers and confirms the amount is 35 million. Desperate, the woman accuses the young man of forging the contract just to show off, but the employee defends the document, saying it was signed by the boss and is legally binding. The protagonist then calls in the bet and tells her to call him daddy, but the old woman refuses to honor it. Out of patience, Gavin slaps her right across the face. The chubby friend cheers on the move, and the protagonist tells him it's time to leave. Xenia, furious with with the humiliation, threatens her ex, saying he'll pay dearly for this. Later, the two friends arrive at the mansion the protagonist rented for the apocalypse. Completely confused, the chubby friend asks why they came back and what his plan is. The protagonist then reveals that he's finally going to prove that the apocalypse is real. The chubby friend thinks his buddy is acting strange and is sure he's finally lost his mind. Outside, Yahello complains about the cold, saying they've been waiting for 2 hours and nothing has happened. But the protagonist looks at his phone and says it's almost time. Suddenly, a shooting star streaks across the sky, and Gavin says it's finally here. Yahello doesn't get it and asks if that's just a regular shooting star. Gavin explains that the real apocalypse only comes in half a month, but there are signs like the cold and the stars. The chubby friend panics and says the shooting star is coming right at them. The protagonist thinks that those stars grant abilities, which is why his neighborhood became a base in the past. He remembers that this star fell on the mansion and was found by a thief in his past life. Desperate, Yahello yells for them to run because the star is going to hit them head on, but the protagonist braces himself and says that this opportunity is his. His friend tries to stop him, asking if he's gone crazy and wants to go out like that. Ignoring the warning, Gavin opens his arms and is hit square in the chest by the star's light. The chubby friend is terrified, thinking his buddy was crushed and that it's all over, but Gavin reemerges with an aura of power and says his physical attributes have increased fivefold. He then turns to his friend and asks if he believes him now. Yahello, surprised, stammers and asks if his friend didn't bite the dust. The protagonist replies that not only is he alive, but he also gained an ability and is stronger. The chubby friend isn't convinced and says he doesn't see a difference, asking how he's stronger. To prove his point, Gavin places a hand on his shoulder, and with just one hand, he easily lifts the chubby friend, who weighs over 200 pounds. The protagonist then asks again with a smile if his buddy believes him now. Yahello panics, unable to believe he was lifted so easily with one arm. Gavin then carries him to the edge of the roof, terrifying the chubby friend. With a scary look, the young man tells his friend to get ready to go down. Then, he simply jumps off the 30-foot high roof with his friend in tow. The two of them land without a single scratch. The chubby friend opens his eyes, surprised to see that he survived. Gavin asks again, and his friend gives in, saying he believes everything after that jump. Meanwhile, in the mansion next door, the redhead's mother asks what her daughter is looking at through the window. The girl says she saw the star fall and complains that it would have been better if it had hit her ex. The redhead tells her mom that Zach will get revenge on the protagonist as soon as he's back. Just then, the mansion's doorbell rings. The mother answers the door, all smiles, and the blonde guy asks where his girlfriend is. The girl then appears all excited and waves to her boyfriend. The rich kid grabs her and says he missed her these past few days. The mother feels awkward, and the blonde guy gets annoyed with her, telling the lady to get out of there. The redhead takes the opportunity to share the news and reveals that Gavin moved into the neighborhood. Zach explodes with anger and asks how he dares to show his face in front of him. The mother adds more fuel to the fire, saying the guy did it to be close to her daughter. Furious, the blonde guy grabs his phone and promises he'll make the protagonist regret this. He then calls someone named Biao, introducing himself as Zach. The scene cuts to a boxing club, and in the ring, one of the boxers was on the phone with the playboy. Zach offers $200,000 for the fighter to take care of someone for him. Biao accepts on the spot and says the job will be done in 2 hours. In the ring, the fighter says he's got a job to do and needs to end this fight quickly. His opponent gets ticked off by the arrogance and calls him a cocky rookie who's asking for a beat down, but the boxer is faster and knocks out the champion with a single, clean punch to the jaw. The crowd goes wild with the victory and hails the fighter as the new king of boxing. Back at the mansion, the protagonist explains the initial stages of the Ice Age. The chubby friend mourns humanity's fate, and Gavin asks him what he's gonna do. Totally convinced, Yahello stands up and says he'll do whatever his friend says without question. The protagonist then jokes and tells him to go back home and sell his own father as he suggested. His friend gets awkward and says his dad would never believe a story about an apocalypse. Gavin explains that soon money will be worthless, and only supplies will truly matter. With that, the chubby friend makes up his mind and says he'll bankrupt the family, even if his dad punishes him for it. Suddenly, the protagonist senses someone approaching the house. He then tells his friend to be quiet, and the chubby guy asks nervously what's happening. Gavin reveals that the mansion is surrounded. In front of the house, the fighter Biao and his goons prepare to break down the door and invade. One of the goons was ready to smash the door with a giant sledgehammer, but just as he was about to swing, the protagonist throws the door open with force, knocking the poor guy out. Gavin and his friend appear and ask who these guys are. Biao is surprised and asks if he's a fighter for having noticed their presence. The protagonist then recognizes him immediately and calls him by his full name, Duan Hubio. The boxer is surprised and asks how he knows him. Gavin remembers that in the apocalypse, the fighter became a powerful ability user. Biao reveals that Zach sent him and that he's going to break some of his bones. The protagonist then tells the goon to leave so he doesn't get hurt. Biao gets annoyed by the audacity and lunges at the protagonist, but Gavin easily dodges and says says the punch was way too slow. Surprised by his reflexes, the boxer tries another punch, but the protagonist sees an opening and lands a punch to his stomach. The other goons are shocked to see their boss get knocked back. The fighter recovers from the blow and says something's wrong, while the protagonist asks if he gives up, but the boxer refuses to surrender, saying no one in the world can make him submit. Out of patience, our hero lands a kick to his jaw. With Biao on the ground, Gavin asks if he's had enough. Even defeated, the boxer insists he won't surrender and can't believe he lost. The protagonist finds this interesting and offers a way to save his sister in exchange for a favor. Biao is shocked to hear this and asks how he knows about his sister's illness. Gavin reveals he knows about her terminal illness and that he fights to pay for her treatment. With renewed hope, Biao asks if he can really save his sister. Gavin says he's the only one who can save her and that it's up to him whether he believes it or not. Biao surrenders on the spot, saying he believes him because he defeated him in combat, and asks what mission he must complete. The mission is to go after Zack, beat him up, and get as much cash out of him as possible. Biao remains silent without complaining. He then calls his goons to follow him on the mission. A goon asks if the boss really trusts the guy, and Biao says he's his only hope. In the other mansion, Zack thinks Gavin is already in the hospital and that it's time to have some fun. With that, he and Xenia enjoy a private moment in the bedroom, but suddenly a loud noise interrupts the mood. The girl's mother gets annoyed by the interruption and goes to see who's knocking at the door. Upon opening the door, the woman comes face to face with Biao and his men and asks who they are. Out of patience, the boxer shoves the woman aside and enters the house with his goons. The woman is furious and yells at the intruders, asking if they have any manners. Biao, having no patience, just slaps the woman across the face. The couple comes downstairs and Zack asks Biao if the job has been successfully completed. He then offers a card with the 200,000 payment for the dirty work, but instead of accepting it, the boxer lands a hard punch to the rich kid's gut. Zack is shocked and asks why the hired goon is attacking him. Biao points at Zack and orders his men to go at him without mercy. They then start kicking the rich kid who's already on the floor. Desperate, the playboy tries to threaten the fighter with the power of his wealthy family. With that, Biao raises his hand and tells his men to stop the beating. Thinking his threat worked, Zack gloats and says the boxer made a mistake. Biao then reveals that his new boss ordered him to hang him up and continue the beatdown. Zack gets desperate at the crazy order and calls the boxer insane. While being dragged away, the rich kid wonders who this boss is, and if it could be Gavin. Hanging, the playboy reveals his transfer limit is 10 million. Biao then demands he transfer the 10 million immediately. At the mansion, the protagonist's friend shows him a message he received on his phone. He informs him about a class training session, but the protagonist immediately declines the invitation. But he changes his mind when he learns the location is near North New City. He then confirms he'll go, and his phone starts ringing at that very moment. It was Biao on the phone, telling him he got the 10 million from Zack. The scene then shifts to the lottery shop. The protagonist remembers the ticket and says he needs to check the results to buy more supplies. But upon checking the ticket, the protagonist is shocked because he didn't win the lottery. He thinks about the butterfly effect but finds it impossible since nothing else in the world has changed. With that, he realizes he needs to find another way to get cash for supplies. The next day, the students gather for their college practical training. Suddenly, the two gold diggers show up, and one of them asks how he dares to show his face there, and Gavin asks why he wouldn't dare show his face. The one with glasses demands an explanation, saying they had to work for a month to pay off the bill. Without a care, Gavin asks what he has to do with their problem. The girl then tries to seduce him, saying they'll do anything if he pays off their debt. The purple-haired one joins in, offering a night with them in exchange for 20,000, but the protagonist turns the tables and asks to borrow 40,000 from the two gold diggers. The two of them are furious at the proposal. Just then, Yahello shows up, and the protagonist asks why his eyes are swollen. His friend reveals it was from crying so much to convince his father about the apocalypse. The protagonist gets excited by his friend's tactic and asks if his plan worked, but his friend says the plan didn't work, as his father ignored him for hours and then gave him a beating. Gavin then comforts him and tells him not to get discouraged, because even he took a while to believe in the apocalypse. Suddenly, a professor appears and tells all the students to get on the bus for the training. Inside the bus, the protagonist sits next to his friend. The chubby friend then says he's thirsty and asks for water, but Gavin says he didn't bring a bottle. Suddenly, the girl sitting next to our protagonist offers her bottle to him. Our guy thanks her and immediately hands the water to Yahello. The girl then consoles Gavin about the breakup with his ex and hopes he gets over it soon. The protagonist says he's not sad and is actually happy to have seen her true colors. She says she heard Xenia was a scammer and offers him money, but Gavin refuses because he knows the girl's family isn't well off. Seeing the scene, the chubby friend notices some chemistry, but the protagonist tells him to shut his mouth. After a while, the bus finally arrives. The counselor then tells everyone to get off to announce their internship positions. He explains that the internships are divided into 3 floors, with the first first being the worst, and he begins to announce the names of the students who will be on the 3rd floor. The 2 gold diggers celebrate getting the best spot, just as Hunter had promised, and one of them asks how they're going to fulfill their promise to him. They then look at the girl who had helped our protagonist on the bus, and the purple-haired one says that QQE is perfect because she's from the countryside, has no connections, and on top of that, she's a virgin. The counselor then continues the roll call and announces the names of the students for the 2nd floor. Yahello gets frustrated because their names weren't called, even for the 2nd group. With that, the professor announces that the remaining 3 will go to the 1st floor. The worst of all, QQE is disappointed and laments that they won't learn anything useful in that place. The other students mock them, wondering why Yahello ended up in the same boat as the 2 broke guys. The protagonist then confronts the counselor and asks what the criteria were for that decision. The man says it was a fair decision by the school and that he shouldn't complain about anything. Gavin then accuses him of lying to his face and calls him shameless. The professor gets angry and threatens to expel him from the school. He tries to justify himself by saying it was fair to put a rich kid and a poor kid in the same place. The chubby friend gets furious and reveals in front of everyone that the professor tried to extort his father. Upon being exposed, the counselor gets angry and calls him insolent. Yahello then shows his phone and says he has a recording of the blackmail to prove it. Suddenly, a guy shows up and says they've crossed the line. He accuses them of having no respect for the professor. The 2 gold diggers also get involved and defend the corrupt professor, saying the trio is ungrateful and that people like them don't even deserve an internship. The protagonist gets annoyed with the guy and tells him to shut up. The bully then calls him a simp and says he went crazy after Xenia dumped him, asking how he dares to talk to him like that. Without a second thought, the protagonist punches him right in the face. The guy gets furious and yells that he hit him first and lunges at him, but Gavin easily blocks the punch. The bully is shocked by his strength and doesn't understand how he got so strong. Then, Gavin lands 2 slaps on his face and reminds him that he told him to get lost. Completely scared, the bully tells the professor that Gavin has gone nuts. The protagonist then lands another punch on the guy and asks if he didn't hear him. The counselor shows up furious and tells the protagonist to stop and apologize, but the young man turns around and slaps the corrupt professor across the face without mercy. The chubby friend cheers, saying that was very satisfying to watch. The other students are shocked and can't believe he hit the professor. The counselor threatens him, saying he's expelled from the internship program, but Gavin lands an uppercut on him and says he doesn't care. With the 2 guys on the floor, the protagonist calls his friend to leave. At this, the chubby friend gets worried and asks what will happen to QQE. The protagonist then turns around and invites the girl to go with them, which makes her blush. The 2 gold diggers butt in, saying they'll take care of her, but the professor only cares about expelling Gavin. They try to convince QQE to go with them, saying the protagonist will ruin her future, but the girl says goodbye to him and tells the protagonist to be careful. With that, the young man tells his friend that now it's time to take care of business. They arrive at a giant logistics park, and his friend explains that it's the largest in the province. Yahello then asks if the plan is to get supplies from that place. He thinks it's impossible because they wouldn't even be able to get inside. The protagonist then sees a hiring sign and calls his friend to check it out. He then approaches and asks the recruiter if they're hiring. The man replies condescendingly that they're only hiring women at the moment. The chubby friend gets desperate and asks what they're gonna do now. The protagonist has an idea and tells his friend to go get QQE to help them. Meanwhile, at the internship office, everyone was working hard. The girl with glasses then tells her friend that Hunter called because Mr. Jiang needs a girl now. With a malicious smile, they decide that QQE is the perfect girl for the job. The 2 then approach their colleague's desk and ask how she's doing. The girl, all happy, thanks them and says she's learned things she would never see in school. The meme girl replies that it was nothing and that's what colleagues do. The purple-haired one then asks if she's ever had a boyfriend, and she says no. The one with glasses gets excited and offers to set their colleague up with a boyfriend. She refuses because she just wants to work, but the 2 insist that a rich boyfriend would bring in more cash. Without giving her a chance to refuse, the 2 drag her off to meet the guy. They then arrive at a very fancy office building. QQE tries to run away, but the 2 say they've already arrived and that the man is a good person. They then enter a room and introduce her to a man named Mr. Jiang, who was waiting for them. The old creep says with a disgusting smile that the girl seems very pure. The purple-haired one pushes QQE forward and introduces her to her new boyfriend. Satisfied, the old man pays the 2 girls 30,000 for their help. The gold diggers say their goodbyes and tell him to enjoy himself, while the girl begs them not to leave her behind, but they ignore her and slam the door in her face, leaving the girl trapped in the room. The disgusting old man then approaches and offers more money if she serves him him well. The girl backs away and threatens him, saying she'll call the police if he doesn't let her go, but Jiang says that all the security guards are his friends and won't help. Cornered, Kyuko begs him to let her go, as she only wanted to work in peace. The disgusting old man then slaps her hand, knocking her phone to the ground. He says it's impossible to escape because no woman has ever left that room unharmed. Lying on the floor, her phone starts to ring. It was a call from the protagonist. Back at the logistics park, our hero feels his phone vibrate in his pocket. He then takes out the device and sees that it's Chuokui calling him. He answers the call and asks what happened, but on the other end, the disgusting old man steps on the phone, smashing it to pieces. He then tells the girl to accept her fate because he's going to make her successful. Chuokui refuses and grabs a potted plant, saying she'd rather perish than surrender. Across town, the protagonist finds it strange that the call dropped suddenly. He then realizes something bad happened to Kyukui and decides to rush back there. Meanwhile, the young woman defends herself and throws the pot at the disgusting old man. The man gets furious with the attack and says she doesn't know what's good for her. He then slaps the girl across the face, knocking her to the ground. Already in the building, the two friends are stopped by a security guard who asks what they're doing there. The chubby friend tries to use his influence, but the guard doesn't seem to recognize him. Out of patience, the protagonist shoves the security guard and tells him to get out of the way. Gavin then says that Kyukui is on the third floor, and they head straight there. The guard tries to stop them, saying Mr. Jiang can't be disturbed right now, but the protagonist turns and says he's Mr. Jiang's father, so he doesn't need to wait. The security guard then asks how he can be the boss's father when he's so young. With that, the guard finally realizes that something is very wrong. He then panics and starts shouting for backup to stop the intruders. The protagonist finally reaches the third floor. As he gets out of the elevator, Gavin comes face to face with the two gold diggers. They are shocked and ask what he's doing in that place, but the protagonist with a serious face asks where Kyukui is. The purple-haired one says he's not an intern and has no right to ask. Gavin then repeats the question with a threatening tone. The girl tries to stand her ground, saying this is no place for him to cause a scene. Out of patience, our hero slaps the girl across the face, sending her to the floor. The one with glasses is outraged and can't believe he dared to hit her friend. He then slaps the other gold digger, who also falls to the floor. With both of them on the ground, he asks for the third time where their colleague is. Scared, they point to a door and say that Kyukui is in Mr. Jiang's office. The purple-haired one tries to warn him that the boss is well connected, but our protagonist doesn't care. He then kicks the door with all his might to break it open. Inside the room, the girl screams for help while the disgusting old man tells the protagonist to get lost. Gavin tells the disgusting old man to let the girl go immediately. An irritated Jiang asks if the young man knows who he's talking to. Intimidated, the protagonist grabs the old creep's finger and starts to twist it, making Jiang scream in pain. Desperate, the man starts to scream and call for the building's security guards. Gavin gets annoyed and lands a kick right in the middle of the creep's face. He then goes to QQ and asks if she's okay, and the young woman says he arrived just in time. At that moment, the security guards finally arrive and ask who's causing trouble. The old creep gets up and orders his goons to finish the two intruders. The two gold diggers celebrate, thinking the protagonist deserves a beating. Suddenly, one of the security guards goes flying and hits the two girls head on. In seconds, all the guards were on the floor, and the young women are shocked. The disgusting boss, terrified on the floor, asks what else the young man wants from him. Gavin then says he's going to make sure he never thinks about women again, and then he lands a blow right in the old man's private parts. With Jiang completely finished, the protagonist moves on to another target. He turns to the two gold diggers with a terrifying look. Scared, the two try to protect themselves, saying he can't hit women. The protagonist ignores their plea and slaps the one with glasses across the face. He then slaps the purple-haired one and warns that he only spared them from serious injury because they're still useful. He then calls his friends to leave the building, leaving them completely wrecked on the floor. The gold digger tries to help the boss and says she'll call the police, but the disgusting old man slaps her and tells her to take him to the hospital. He then grabs his phone and calls someone, asking for help to put an end to the boy. Outside, Kyukui thanks the protagonist for his help. He says it was nothing and asks what her plans are for the future. Kyukui laments that she lost the internship and now doesn't know how she'll get a job. The protagonist then offers to find a job for the girl. She gets excited about the proposal and asks if he can really get her a job. With that, the trio returns to the logistics park where it all began. The girl is surprised and asks if he really wants her to work there, and the protagonist confirms. She then comments that the position is for a warehouse manager and she has a degree in finance, but Gavin encourages her, saying that all work is valuable and that she can shine anywhere. The recruiter gets annoyed and asks if they're going to take the job because it's almost closing time. With that, Gavin encourages her to apply and she agrees to take the job. The protagonist then says goodbye and tells them he'll visit her in a few days to see how she's doing. Yahello comments that only a fool like her would accept a security job when she's from the finance finance field, but the protagonist says it was precisely because of her foolishness that she got the opportunity. After leaving the logistics park, Gavin says it's time to go home. Suddenly, a gun is pointed at our protagonist's head, and they're told not to move. It was Mr. Lowe's goons, and the two friends raise their hands in surrender. The thug warns that the 3 days are up and that now their bodies belong to the boss. Yahello asks if they're really going with these guys, since he could easily take them down, but Gavin says to go with them, because the real show is about to begin. They then arrive at an abandoned warehouse, and one of the goons orders the two to get out of the van. The terrified, chubby friend points out that they're in an abandoned factory in the suburbs. One of the goons gets annoyed with the delay and tells the two to hurry up and get inside, but the protagonist quickly turns around, and with a swift move, he disarms the guy and takes the gun for himself. Then, he doesn't think twice and fires a shot right through the middle of the goon's head, taking him out instantly. Seeing this, all the goons go on alert, but he's faster and takes them all down with precise shots. The chubby friend's jaw drops, and he praises him, saying he's a sharpshooter. The protagonist then hands a magazine of bullets to Yahello to defend himself if needed. He remembers that in the apocalypse, he had no powers, so he trained his aim to survive. Yahello holds the gun awkwardly and tells Gavin he doesn't know how to use it. The protagonist then asks if his friend plays shooting games, and Yahello proudly replies that he's a pro. With that, Gavin suggests he pretend he's playing one of those games right now to feel more confident. The scene then cuts to the inside of the warehouse, where a truck is parked, and several people are unloading goods. Seeing the truck, Yahello recognizes the Zyway Biotech logo, questioning why one of the world's top 3 bio corporations would be there. At this, the protagonist reveals that in his past life, Zyway Biotech was hailed as the savior of humanity, but he now suspects they're not as simple as they seem. Suddenly, 2 guards in military uniforms notice the pair's presence and shout, asking who's there, but our guy is faster and fires his gun, hitting both guards. He then approaches one of the bodies and picks up an ID card, confirming they were indeed Zyway Biotech employees. Inside the warehouse, a blonde woman is talking to Mr. Lowe, saying it was a pleasure doing business, and that Zyway Biotech is very satisfied with the fresh parts he provided. Mr. Lowe replies that the honor is his and mentions that 2 more live and fresh parts will arrive soon to complete the set of 6. At that moment, he turns and is surprised to see Gavin and Yahello approaching. With that, he introduces them to the woman as the last 2 parts of the batch, ironically asking if she's satisfied with them being alive and kicking. The woman from Zyway Biotech then gets intrigued and asks Mr. Lowe why the parts are carrying guns. Mr. Lowe is surprised to realize they are armed, but before he could say anything, Gavin shoots him without hesitation. The shot hits Mr. Lowe square in the knee, and he falls, screaming in pain, ordering his men to capture him immediately. The protagonist then opens fire on the goons, taking them all down. Noticing the scene, the woman is impressed by Gavin's precise aim, while the injured boss yells for everyone to get them. Then, our guy tells Yahello to stay hidden, and says he'll take care of the remaining enemies as he continues to fire at the goons. Furious, Mr. Lowe yells that in all these years, no one has dared to cause trouble on his turf and orders his men to crush them since they no longer want their organs. The protagonist continues to eliminate the goons with insane precision. The remaining guards and the Zyway woman are shocked by his speed and start firing while shouting to stop him, but all the goons are defeated and fall right at the woman's feet. With all the enemies on the ground, Gavin and his friend approach the 2 survivors, and the woman asks what they want. Then, the protagonist points the gun at them and retorts that he should be the one asking what they want there. Mr. Lowe gets annoyed by the audacity and questions if a punk like him is qualified to know their plans. In response, our hero fires again, hitting the trafficking boss in the shoulder. He then gives him a cold stare and tells him to repeat what he said, because now he's listening. On his knees and holding his injured arm, Mr. Lowe tries to maintain his composure and warns that he's not easily scared, saying the boy has no idea who he's messing with. The protagonist then turns to Yahello and orders him to finish the boss, leaving the chubby friend completely shocked by the request. With a cold, serious look, Gavin repeats the order and insists that he do as he's told. At this, Mr. Lowe seizes the opportunity, grabs a fallen gun from the floor, and says they can go to heck, but Yahello is faster and, with his eyes closed, fires his gun at the trafficking boss. In his final moments, Mr. Lowe is completely stunned as he feels the bullet pierce his forehead. Seeing the boss's body on the floor, the chubby friend panics, realizing he just took a person's life. Gavin then turns to the Zyway woman, saying that Lowe was trash and his knowledge doesn't compare to hers. The surprised woman asks how he knows her name and who he is. Our guy replies that she doesn't need to know who he is, but if she insists, she can call him Daddy. Hearing the taunt, the woman gets furious and yells at him not to be so insolent. Unfazed, the protagonist simply shoots her in the leg, and she falls to the ground, screaming in pain from the impact. The Zyway Biotech executive tries to threaten him, asking if he's thought about the consequences of attacking her, but the protagonist ignores her and shoots her in the other leg without hesitation. He then approaches and says he's not interested in her useless threats. Desperate, the woman begs him not to shoot and reveals they use the human organs provided by low for human experiments. Hearing this, our guy asks what kind of experiments they're conducting. She then explains they are researching human evolution and bioweapons, offering to take him there if he spares her life. With that, Gavin has a flashback of the Manus war god, and realizes the creature was created with these experiments which began even before the apocalypse. The woman is shocked and asks how he could know about such a secret project. At this, Yahello opens one of the boxes and screams in horror that it's full of human organs. Seeing the situation, the executive tries to recruit the protagonist, offering unimaginable wealth and power if he joins Zyway Biotech, but the protagonist rejects the offer on the spot, saying he's not interested. In desperation, the woman begs not to be taken out and promises she can still be useful. He then questions how she could possibly help him. At this, she tries to seduce him and says she's very good with her mouth. But apparently it didn't work because Gavin puts a bullet in the woman's head. He then scoffs, saying she couldn't even stop a bullet with her mouth. Shortly after, Gavin searches her body and finds a VIP access card to the Zyway Biotech headquarters. The scene cuts to another location, and Mr. Jiang was furious that something had happened at Zyway Biotech and questions who would be so bold. He says that, as an investor, he has the right to know what's going on, and that they can't hide it from him. Hunter then appears to meet with him. With a vengeful look, the disgusting old man orders Hunter to take care of a young man named Gavin. He confirms he already has a personal problem with the protagonist and promises to deliver one of his hands in a few days. Back at the mansion, Mr. Xiao informs him that the main structure has been reinforced to a level that not even a tank could break through. He then details that the internal renovation, including ventilation and underground water, will be ready in a week, and the protagonist thanks him for his hard work. At this, a woman approaches and introduces herself as Aunt Liu from the residence committee to welcome the new neighbor, and Gavin introduces himself politely. Shortly after, she invites him to join the neighborhood chat group for easier communication. Upon accepting, the woman notices several cardboard boxes from the construction and asks if she can come in to get them, since he probably doesn't need them anymore. Our guy then agrees that he doesn't need the boxes, but explains that it's not convenient for her to enter the house at the moment. But Aunt Liu insists and says she'll get a cart, forcing Gavin to be firmer and ask her not to delay the construction progress. The woman calls him stingy, but Gavin tries to be diplomatic and offers to bring the boxes to her house in a week. But Aunt Liu refuses and demands the boxes now, afraid that someone else will sell them before she can. With no more patience, the protagonist loses his cool and yells at the woman to just get lost. Shocked by the reaction, the woman confronts him and asks why he, a punk, is cussing at people. With that, our guy threatens her directly, telling her to get lost or he'll give her a good thrashing. As she leaves, the woman complains about the lack of respect from young people and threatens him, saying he'll get what he deserves sooner or later. The scene then cuts to Zack, who offers 500,000 to a group of goons led by a man named One-Eyed Dragon. One-Eyed Dragon says that the young master is too kind and that as employees of the vast dragon group, it's their duty to serve, but Zack insists it's a personal matter and that his only demand is that they make Gavin Clark disappear from the world, leaving no evidence. With a wicked smile, One-Eyed Dragon introduces himself as a professional hitman and guarantees that the protagonist will vanish without a trace that very night. As he watches the assassins leave the room, he gives a serious look and says that Gavin has no idea of the power behind him and that he could take him out with a snap of his fingers. The scene then shifts to a luxury hotel at night, and the One-Eyed Dragon's boss asks if he's sure about this. The goon confirms that Gavin is staying in the presidential suite of that hotel. The assassin's leader then orders everyone to stay alert for any movement and not let the boy escape. Meanwhile, inside the suite, our protagonist relaxes on the sofa and thinks that everything has gone according to plan since he was reborn. He reflects that in 3 days, the most important stage of the plan will begin, and its success will define everything. Suddenly, Gavin hears a noise coming from outside the room, and on the other side of the door, One-Eyed Dragon slowly approaches the suite with a gun in hand. Noticing the movement, the protagonist concludes that it must be the goons sent by Zack and decides to play their game. On the other side of the door, our guy hears the invasion plan, but realizes there's more than one group of enemies approaching. At this, Hunter's gang arrives, and one of the goons underestimates the target, but Hunter warns him not to be careless, as Gavin has already defeated and robbed another group before. Then, one of Hunter's men shows a tranquilizer gun, assuring the boss that this time they are well prepared for the mission. With that, Hunter gives the final order to his men, telling them to beat Gavin to a pulp and then cut off one of his ears to send as proof to Mr. Jiang. Inside the suite, the protagonist smiles and says the day is getting exciting, deciding to have a little fun before turning off the room's lights. Seeing the lights go out, One-Eyed Dragon assumes the target is asleep and orders his men to storm the room immediately. On the other side, Hunter's gang also sees the lights go out and, with the same assumption, moves into the suite. The two groups of assassins then enter the dark room from opposite sides sides, unaware of each other's presence. Shortly after, one eye dragon notices movement in the darkness and signals his men to stop, warning that someone is ahead. The assassin then points his gun at Hunter's silhouette and orders him to stay put, mistaking him for his target. Hunter retorts that he's the one who shouldn't move an inch. With that, one-eyed dragon gets annoyed by the audacity and asks how the punk dares to be so arrogant with him. Hunter yells back, questioning if the other guy got the script wrong, since he was the one who was supposed to say that. One-eyed dragon then calls him a talker and assures him he won't get out of there alive today. Furious with the arrogance, Hunter complains that the boy is acting as if he's also there to do a hit and orders his men to eliminate him. On the other side, one-eyed dragon also loses his patience and yells for his goons to take out the target. Then, the two groups of assassins start shooting at each other in the darkness, each believing they are fighting the target and his backup. One of one-eyed dragon's goons warns the boss that the boy has backup and tells everyone to grab their weapons. At the same time, one of Hunter's men screams in desperation that the target has a lot of backup and orders everyone to open fire. From a safe spot, the protagonist watches the chaos with a smile and thinks about letting the fools play their little games. After the intense shootout, one-eyed dragon leans on the light switch, accidentally turning on the lights, and celebrates finally taking down all the enemies. With the lights on, Hunter, also injured on the floor, recognizes the assassin and asks what one-eyed dragon is doing there. One-eyed dragon then recognizes Hunter Walsh and asks what he's doing there and where the punk Gavin is, to which Hunter yells that he was about to ask the same thing, as he's also there to take out the boy. At this, the two gang leaders realize they've been tricked, and one-eyed dragon yells in anger, concluding that Gavin probably escaped a long time ago. 3 days later, Yahello approaches the protagonist to give him some news, and Gavin asks what happened. The chubby friend then reveals that Counselor Q Changdong used his connections to get him expelled from school, but Gavin just laughs and says a diploma will be useless in the apocalypse. Yahello insists he can't stand the smug look on the counselor's face, who is currently bragging in the class chat group. The confident protagonist says he has a way to deal with him. Next, we see the class chat, where Counselor Q Changdong announces the expulsion of Gavin Clark for disruption and assault, with the bully Wang celebrating and the counselor himself mocking Gavin publicly. Reading the taunting messages in the group, our guy gets a serious look on his face. He sends a picture of a middle finger and calls Counselor Q Changdong an idiot in the class group. With that, the professor gets furious at the audacity and calls him an unemployed bum, threatening him to just wait. Then, Gavin sends a message to all members, formally reporting Q Changdong for having a long-term affair with director Lee's wife and pointing to their meeting places and surveillance footage as proof. Reading the message, Yahello is shocked by the explosive news and asks his friend how he knew all that. The protagonist then reveals with a smile that in his past life, he and the counselor were trapped together at the school during the apocalypse, and Q Changdong himself confessed everything when human morality collapsed. Desperate, the counselor orders in the chat for the administrator to disband the group immediately and threatens anyone who dares to leak the messages. Seeing his panic, Yahello laughs and decides to post the chat logs on the school forum right away. Shortly after, our guy says it's time to go as they have important business to attend to, leaving his chubby friend curious. At this, the protagonist asks if Yahello's father still doesn't believe him, and his friend confirms, saying he's one step away from being committed to a mental hospital. Gavin then assures him that after they finish their business, he will go with Yahello to see his father, and then he will finally believe everything. The scene then cuts to later. Yahello asks what kind of big event could happen there, and the protagonist announces that they've arrived. They then stop in front of a house that Yahello notes is considered to be from a wealthy family by the neighborhood standards. Suddenly, a voice from inside the house angrily complains that the booze has run out again. Inside the house was a drunk man sitting in a room full of empty bottles, with a young girl trapped in a cage in the corner. The man then casts a furious glare in the direction of the caged girl, but the girl stares right back at him. At this, the man gets angry at her stare, throws the empty bottle at the cage, and threatens her, saying he'll rip her eyes out if she keeps it up. He then calls her a brat who only causes trouble and complains that he's already spent all the dowry her mother brought, deciding he's going to sell her family's house. He reveals with a wicked smile that before selling the house, he'll sell her first, as she's worth at least enough for a few drinks. With that, the man opens the cage, grabs the girl's hair forcefully, and yells for her to get out. He then reveals that he beat her mother until she was gone for refusing to buy him drinks and threatens her with the same fate if she dares to disobey him. The girl then bites his hand. Furious at her reaction, he raises his hand to strike her and yells that today she will join her mother. But before he can attack, the front door is kicked open. In the doorway, the protagonist and his friend Yahello appear with serious expressions, ready for action. The man then stands up, still holding the girl, and asks who they are, to which Gavin replies with the question, "What do you think?" In a flashback, the protagonist reveals that this man is Feng Ku, a despicable thug who gained a hyperspace ability and became a national hero by transporting supplies for the government at the start of the apocalypse. However, he also remembers that Feng Ku betrayed everyone by running off with a massive load of supplies, which resulted in the passing of 1 million people from starvation and cold. Finally, the flashback shows that Feng Ku did not have a good end, as he ended up perishing in the claws of an ice demon, causing all the supplies he stole to disappear forever. Back in the present, the protagonist is surprised to see the girl, thinking he never heard of her in his past life. With that, Feng Ku mistakes them for human traffickers and offers to sell the girl for an extra $100, commenting that a little later, he would have beaten her senseless. Hearing this, Yahello explodes with anger and calls him a beast, leaving Feng Ku confused by the insult. The chubby friend then repeats the accusation, saying he's worse than a pig or a dog. Feng Ku gets annoyed by the hypocrisy and calls Yahello a human trafficker who's acting all high and mighty, but the protagonist's friend denies the accusation, saying he's not a despicable person like him. Then Feng Ku threatens him with a bottle and says he's going to crack his skull for causing trouble. Before he could attack, Yahello fires his gun and hits Feng Ku right in the leg. With that, Gavin praises his friend, saying his aim is getting better every day. Lying on the floor and holding his injured leg, Feng Ku angrily asks who the heck they are. Yahello then warns that he won't let a scumbag like Feng Ku get away with it. Suddenly, the girl takes advantage of the distraction and smashes Feng Ku's head with the broken bottle. Seeing the scene, both the protagonist and his friend are completely shocked by the girl's actions. With his head bleeding, Feng Ku gets enraged and calls the girl a witch, in disbelief that she dared to attack him. Without giving him time to react, the girl attacks him again. Lying on the floor and completely injured, Feng Ku threatens her, saying he'll skin her alive for daring to hit him. With a look of pure fury, the girl raises the broken bottle with both hands, ready to deliver the final blow. She then begins to beat him relentlessly, and while Yahello tries to intervene, the protagonist stops him and tells him to leave the girl alone. The protagonist then realizes that this is the result of overwhelming hatred and that if they stop her from venting now, her life will be ruined. With that, the girl continues the brutal assault until the broken bottle is completely covered in blood. With Feng Ku's body on the floor, the girl stands beside him, trembling with rage. Seeing the scene, Yahello is shocked and yells that he's gone, but the protagonist coldly states that someone like him deserved it. Then, Gavin warns that it's almost time and tells his friend to take the girl to clean up and calm down while he goes up to the roof. On top of the building, the protagonist watches a meteor shower crossing the night sky, with one of them being much larger and brighter than the others. With that, he smiles and thinks that the greatest opportunity he could have before the apocalypse has finally arrived. Then, our guy opens his arms and is completely enveloped in a golden light that descends from the heavens, absorbing the meteor's power. Shortly after, he celebrates with a triumphant smile, shouting that he finally got what he was waiting for. With his new ability, he finds himself floating in a gigantic hyperspace, the size of dozens of football fields, and realizes that now he can store as many supplies as he wants. Back to reality on the roof, he suddenly hears a buzzing sound from the street below and looks back. Looking down, the protagonist is surprised to see a police car parked in front of the building. Outside, a handcuffed bald man points to the house and tells the police that's the place where Feng Ku is going to sell him a girl. With that, the lead officer gives the order for all units to get ready and storm the location. Meanwhile, inside the house, the girl is already clean and in new clothes. Yahello comments that now that she's cleaned up, the little sister is actually very cute. Then, the protagonist warns that the authorities are outside, and his chubby friend panics, remembering that the body and the weapons are still with them. But our guy calms him down, saying that while before their only option was to run, now the story is different. With a subtle gesture, he uses his new hyperspace ability and makes Feng Ku's body disappear right in front of Yahello, who is shocked by the scene. Shortly after, the police kick down the door and yell for everyone to freeze. The lead officer then points his gun at them and asks who Feng Ku is. The bald man says that none of them is Feng Ku. The officer then turns to the two young men and asks what they are doing in that place. The protagonist then introduces himself as Gavin and lies, saying he's a distant cousin of the girl and just came to check on her. Then, Yahello also introduces himself, saying he's just a classmate who came along with his friend. The officer then kneels to talk to the little girl and, in a gentle tone, asks for her name. The girl replies that her name is Sixie. At this, the officer points to our hero and asks Sixie if she really knows him. The girl then confirms the protagonist's story, saying he is her cousin, as her mother had told her about him. Satisfied with the answer, the officer says his goodbyes and tells them to contact him immediately if they have any leads on Feng Ku. Seeing the police leave, Yahello sighs in relief and says they finally got out of that one, suggesting they leave quickly. But as he turns to leave, the girl Sixie stops him. With that, Yahello realizes they almost forgot about Zixie and wonders what will happen to her now that Feng Ku is gone. Then, the protagonist turns to the girl and asks if she wants to go with them. Sixie then nods her head and agrees to go with them. Yahello insists they take her, and Gavin agrees, but warns that he doesn't support freeloaders. He then tests her and asks if she knows how to make instant noodles noodles. With an excited smile, the girl confirms that she knows how. The protagonist then agrees, and they leave together. As they walk down the street, Yahello says he's hungry and suggests getting hot pot, asking Sixie if she can handle spicy food. The scene then cuts to 3 days before the apocalypse, with Gavin and Yahello walking towards a luxurious mansion. The chubby friend confesses he's still a little scared, but our guy reassures him, saying there's nothing to fear and that they need to convince his father today, one way or another. Inside the mansion, Yahello's father is reading the newspaper and yells for the two punks to stop talking nonsense and leave. Yahello then tries to convince his father, saying that everything Gavin said is true and that the ice apocalypse will arrive in 3 days, but the man gets annoyed and tells them to get out at once so they don't disturb his tea time. At this, the protagonist uses his hyperspace ability and makes his teacup disappear from the table. Noticing it's gone, Yahello's father is completely confused and wonders where his tea went. Gavin reveals that he was the one who took it and that this is the superpower he was talking about. The chubby friend's father, however, isn't convinced and accuses him of doing magic tricks to try and fool him. Then Gavin uses his ability again and makes the sofa disappear, causing Yahello's father to fall to the floor. Shortly after, Gavin approaches him and asks if he finally believes his story now. Yahello's father refuses to believe and accuses them of trying to trick him, stating they are too naive to pull one over on him. Then our protagonist activates his hyperspace ability again, making the chubby friend's father fall to the floor, but the man is still not convinced and challenges him, saying he'll only believe if the protagonist can make everything in the room disappear. Without hesitation, Gavin uses his ability again and makes all the furniture in the room vanish in an instant, leaving the place completely empty. The chubby friend's father is in disbelief as the protagonist asks with a smile if he finally believes now. Suddenly, the man turns and slaps his own son hard across the face. Completely confused, the chubby friend holds his face and asks his father why he hit him like that. The father then explains that he did to make sure he wasn't dreaming and finally says that he now believes everything. The scene then cuts to another location, with only 2 days left until the ice apocalypse. Yahello receives a transfer notification for 760 million. With that, Yahello appears, all excited, and says his father finally transferred the money as promised. The protagonist then tells them to split up, sending his friend to focus on buying cold weather gear and other supplies for the apocalypse, while he goes to inspect the mansion and try to buy some weapons. Next, the scene cuts to the newly renovated mansion, which now looks like a true, impenetrable fortress. Shortly after, Mr. Zhou appears and informs him that all construction and renovation of the mansion have been completed exactly to the protagonist's specifications, asking if he is satisfied. With a smile on his face, our guy replies that he is very satisfied and praises the renovation company's boss for thinking of everything. Mr. Zhou then explains that this was the most difficult renovation project his company has ever done and that he personally supervised the entire process, ensuring that with enough supplies, one could live there until they passed on. At this, the protagonist shakes his hand and promises to transfer the final payment as soon as possible, while Mr. Zhao says his goodbyes and prepares to leave. But as the company boss was leaving, Gavin calls him one last time to give a final warning. The protagonist advises him not to leave his house for the next 2 days and to stock up on as much food and supplies as he can. Mr. Zhao is curious about the warning and asks if a typhoon is coming, and Gavin confirms that it's a super typhoon that only happens once a century. With that, the head of the renovation company agrees to listen to him, saying that since he's been exhausted lately, it will be a good chance to rest for a few days. Shortly after, several huge trucks arrive and park in front of the protagonist's mansion, bringing a massive amount of supplies. At this, the chubby friend appears in one of the trucks and announces that he's back with the supplies, assuring him that he bought the best and most expensive things he could find. Then, Gavin tells him to bring everything inside the mansion so he can store all the items in his hyperspace. Outside, a woman and her grandson watch the scene, and she wonders why they bought so many things, questioning if they're going to open a supermarket at home. Seeing one of the boxes, her grandson points to a picture of candy and asks his grandmother for a lollipop. The grandmother then agrees and picks him up so he can grab a lollipop from the top of the supply box. Suddenly, Yahello approaches the protagonist with a worried look and says he's run into a problem, making Gavin curious. And then, the chubby friend desperately complains that the problem is not being able to spend all the money, as he hasn't even spent 100 million of the total yet. With that, the protagonist gives his friend a new mission, telling him he'll give him the addresses of some large granaries to go and buy all the grain he can find there. In a flashback, Gavin remembers that in his past life, the grain from those granaries was stolen by a group of villains, and he is determined to cut them off this time. Suddenly, one of the delivery guys approaches and informs him that there's a final batch of crossbows they couldn't move because an elderly lady won't let them pass. Arriving at the scene, they find Aunt Lou trying to open one of the boxes with a utility knife, while her impatient grandson yells at her to hurry up because he wants to eat what's inside now. At this, the protagonist appears behind her with a serious expression and asks what she's doing. The woman then turns and, with a fake smile, says that since he bought so many things, her grandson wants a lollipop and asks if if he minds. But our guy stares at her with a cold look and replies directly that yes, he does mind. Aunt Liu then gets annoyed and calls him stingy, saying that taking a lollipop will serve as an apology for what happened last time, and still demands that he leave all the boxes for her to take. With no more patience, Gavin tells her to just get lost and leave. Furious, the woman gets worked up and says that as the vice director of the neighborhood committee, she can take things from anyone's house, and accuses him of ruining the neighborhood's harmony. Suddenly, her grandson climbs on one of the boxes and celebrates getting the lollipop. With that, Gavin completely loses his patience and yells at the woman to get her grandson off the box immediately, but the spoiled boy refuses to get down, calls him a villain, and threatens to destroy him in the name of the monsters. Then, our hero rolls up his sleeves and yells at the brat to get down from there right now, but the old woman stops him and tells the protagonist to stay away from her and her grandson. However, while jumping on the box, its lid gives way, and he ends up falling inside. Unfortunately for him, that box was full of crossbow bolts, and several of them end up sticking into his backside. Feeling the pain from the bolts, the boy starts screaming desperately that it hurts a lot. The grandmother then rushes to pick him up, while the grandson continues to cry and complain about the pain in his rear end. Watching the scene with a satisfied smile, the protagonist simply says that serves them right. Furious, Aunt Lou threatens the protagonist, saying he hurt her grandson and will have to compensate her, vowing to come back to settle the score. With that, she leaves with her grandson while the protagonist watches the scene. In the distance, his ex-girlfriend Xenia and a friend watch everything from a balcony. The redhead then questions what Gavin is doing buying so many supplies. At this, Xenia's best friend, Yang Zeking, comments that he's crazy for stocking up on so much in the heat and wonders if he's not afraid of everything spoiling. The ex-girlfriend then says not to worry because Zach will take care of him, and then invites her friend to go to the beauty salon. The scene cuts to the logistics park with one day left before the apocalypse. There, the chubby friend celebrates that all the money was spent on buying 5 entire granaries, an amount of food that would last forever. Shortly after, the protagonist tells his friend that after they meet with QQE, the first thing they'll do is collect all the grain. Upon meeting the girl, she greets Gavin all happy, and he asks how her work at the logistics park has been these last few days. QQE then replies that the work is great and that she was even promoted to warehouse supervisor, but asks how much longer she needs to stay there. The protagonist informs her that she can leave tomorrow, and the girl gets super excited about the news, saying she'll quit immediately. But the protagonist stops her and says she doesn't need to quit because he needs her to do one last thing for him. With that, he reveals that he needs her help to get the warehouse keys because he's going to the logistics park that very night. Hearing that, the girl is shocked by the request and asks what he's planning to do by going there in the middle of the night. The young man then says he'll tell her everything later and asks her to wait for him inside the warehouse, leaving the girl even more confused. He tells her to remember to wait for him and not to tell absolutely anyone about the plan. QQE becomes thoughtful and starts to suspect the protagonist's true intentions. Later, already in one of the granaries, a man informs Gavin and his friend that all the food they bought is already there for inspection. Inside the enormous warehouse, our guy dismisses the site manager and says his people will take care of everything from here on out. Right after the man leaves, Yahello celebrates excitedly and says that now that they're alone, it's time to begin. Then, the protagonist activates his hyperspace ability and prepares to collect and store all the supplies from the granary. Inside his hyperspace, the chubby friend is amazed and says it's incredible how all that food disappeared in an instant. The protagonist then explains that any item that enters the hyperspace will remain in the exact same state. With that, Yahello asks if that means the flow of time in the hyperspace is 0, and Gavin admits he's not sure and will need to research that later. Suddenly, the site manager returns to the granary and says he came back to get something he forgot, but upon entering the warehouse, he is completely shocked by what he finds inside. He can't believe his eyes and wonders if he's hallucinating, as a mountain of food simply vanished in a moment. After emptying the granaries, our guy goes to the logistics park and knocks on the door of the warehouse, where QQE is waiting for him. The girl then opens the door and is surprised to see him, greeting him a bit awkwardly. He then warns her that what she's about to see might be shocking, but that she can't make any sound, and the young woman agrees. He then asks if she's ready and announces that he's going to start. QQE apparently misunderstood everything and closes her eyes, completely embarrassed. Noticing she was distracted, the protagonist calls her name and tells her to stop daydreaming and follow him. With that, QQ snaps back to reality and runs to keep up with Gavin. They then stop in front of the gigantic warehouse shelves, which are completely packed with supplies. He then extends his hand and thinks that after collecting this batch, the amount of resources he has accumulated will reach an astronomical figure. And then, everything simply vanishes from there. Seeing the shelves magically empty, QQ panics and screams, asking what on earth is happening. With the warehouse completely empty, the girl turns to Gavin and asks how the goods disappeared and if he was the one who did it. The protagonist says he'll explain everything later, but first, they need to go collect the goods from the other warehouses. The scene then cuts to the logistics park surveillance room. Inside the surveillance room, QQ is is confused and asks the protagonist what they are doing in that place. With that, Gavin uses his ability and with a single gesture disables all the security cameras in the logistics park at once. Shortly after, he says he'll explain everything when they get back and calls for her to finally leave. The scene then cuts to the protagonist's mansion, showing the shelter already prepared for the night before the apocalypse. In the living room, little Sixie serves a cup of tea to Kyukui, who thanks the little girl for her kindness. Then, the young man asks if Kyukui believes the story about the apocalypse he told her, and she confirms that she believes him. Hearing that, Yahello comments with a smile that she really has unconditional trust in Gavin. Then, our guy announces to the group that the apocalypse begins tomorrow, and that from that moment on no one is allowed to leave the house. But Kyukui says she needs to go out to take care of one last thing, and the protagonist allows it, on the condition that she returns before noon tomorrow. The scene then shifts to a large building, as the countdown to the ice apocalypse finally reaches 0 days. In Zach's office, one-eyed dragon explains that they encountered another group hired to take out Gavin and ended up in a friendly fire incident, promising it won't happen again. With that, Zach gets annoyed and says his patience has run out with so many failures. Then, the playboy decides to handle the matter personally, grabs a gun, and calls his goons to go with him. The scene then cuts to Kyukui, who is on a street feeding several stray cats and dogs as her last task before the apocalypse. She says goodbye to the animals, warning that the apocalypse is coming, and she won't be able to feed them anymore, asking them to learn to take care of themselves. Shortly after, the girl bids them farewell and says she hopes to see them all again one day. At the same time, Zack and one-eyed dragon watch her from a distance, with the goon informing him that Gavin has been staying in the mansion and it's been difficult to make a move. At this, one-eyed dragon suggests that the girl must be his girlfriend and that they can kidnap her to force the protagonist to show up. Back at the mansion, Yahello answers a call and is completely panicked by the news he receives. He then runs to the protagonist and warns him that the scumbag Zack has captured Kyukui and is demanding that he go there alone to rescue her. Hearing the news, the protagonist gets furious and says that Zack is asking for trouble and that it seems he won't live to see the apocalypse. The scene then cuts to an abandoned factory. With that, Gavin arrives at the location and Zack taunts him, calling him an idiot for daring to show up there alone, but the protagonist tells him to cut the chit-chat and demands that he release Kyukui first. Then, Zack orders his goons to let the girl go, and she is pushed in Gavin's direction. Upon being released, Kyukui runs desperately towards Gavin for protection. However, the playboy calls him naive and shoots the girl. Seeing the shot coming towards her, Kyukui is completely panicked, but Gavin is faster and pulls her close, managing to dodge the bullet by a hair's breadth. Seeing the scene, Zack can't believe they managed to dodge the shot. With the girl in his arms, Gavin asks if she's okay, and Kyukui warns that the enemies have guns and tells him to run, but our guy reassures her with a smile and tells her not to be afraid because he'll take care of the rest. He then turns to Zack and says he intended to let him live a few more days, but now he's going to finish him sooner than planned. Furious, the playboy orders his men to torture him for a while and not let him go out so easily. With that, one of the goons steps forward, promising Zack that he'll take care of the protagonist. However, Gavin knocks him out, sending him flying against the wall, and asks if he came there to meet his end. Seeing the scene, the other goons are shocked by his strength, not understanding what happened. Shortly after, one-eyed dragon sends more men to attack, and 2 of them charge at him with everything they've got. Gavin then dodges with ease, and with a swift move, he grabs the enemy's arm and neutralizes the knife with his bare hands. Then, he turns the knife on the goon and stabs him in the leg. Shortly after, our hero turns and stabs the other 2 goons in the legs with the knife, dropping them to the floor as they scream in pain. Seeing the scene, Kyukui is completely shocked and can't believe how strong Gavin is. With that, Zack panics and doesn't understand how the protagonist has these skills, but one-eyed dragon calms him down and reminds him they still have guns. Then, one-eyed dragon points his gun at the protagonist and challenges him, saying that if he's so tough, he should try dodging this bullet. But before he could shoot, the goon is hit by a bullet in the chest and is left completely stunned. With a victorious smile, Gavin reveals that he also has a gun and that he was faster on the draw. Seeing one-eyed dragon's body on the floor, Zack panics and can't believe what happened. Kyukui is horrified to realize that the protagonist just took someone's life right in front of her. Completely terrified, Zack turns and starts running to get out of that place as fast as possible, but the protagonist fires his gun and hits the playboy in the leg, preventing his escape. With him on the ground, Gavin approaches and ironically asks if he really thinks he can run away. Desperate, Zack tries to use his influence and yells that he's the heir of the dragon group and that Gavin can't touch him, but our guy ignores the threat and shoots him in the other leg without hesitation. With that, he coldly replies that he just touched him, showing that he's not afraid at all. Realizing he's done for, Zack admits defeat and tells the protagonist to name his price. Then, Gavin demands the absurd amount of 1 trillion. The playboy is completely shocked upon hearing that impossible demand. Shortly after, he gets annoyed and accuses the protagonist of joking, as no one could pay 1 trillion. At this, Gavin calls him poor for not being able to pay and kicks him in the face to teach him a lesson. Completely defeated, Frustrated, the playboy starts begging for mercy and asks the protagonist to stop hitting him, but Gavin ignores him and continues the beating while yelling that he warned him he would finish that coward today. Suddenly, a police car arrives, and one of the officers yells for everyone to freeze and not move. The protagonist then grabs Zach by the collar and asks if he was the one who called the police. The playboy confirms with a mocking smile that he called them as a plan B. Then, the rich kid boasts that now Gavin can't take him out and will also spend the rest of his life in prison for public assault. Out of patience, Gavin simply shoots the playboy in his private parts. The rich kid then starts screaming in pain and cries that the protagonist crushed his jewels and ruined his happiness. At that moment, the police approach and order the protagonist to stop and drop the weapon, but he explains that he won't take Zach out because that would be too easy. Shortly after, he turns to the police and assures them that he won't be caught. No way. With the police ordering his arrest, Gavin raises his hands in a sign of surrender, and then he begins a countdown finishing with "Time's up." At this, one of the officers pointing a gun at him is completely shocked to realize it was snowing, and then all the officers look up, their mouths agape at the sight of falling snow, wondering how it's possible. One of them then questions what is happening and why it's snowing in the middle of summer. The scene then shows the sunny sky being overtaken by a sudden blizzard, as the weather begins to change drastically. With that, the police officers start to shiver violently and shout that it's freezing because the temperature is dropping rapidly. At the same time, one of the injured goons panics and begs for help, realizing his wounds are freezing over due to the extreme cold. Zach also begins to freeze on the ground and pleads for help, saying he's gonna freeze solid, but the protagonist watches him with a victorious look. With Zach and his goons freezing, the lead officer orders his men to save them. Gavin then takes Kyukyu's hand and says it's freezing, the apocalypse has truly arrived, and he hurries her along as the temperature will continue to drop. A police officer tries to stop them and points a gun at the young man, ordering him to stop. Gavin then turns and advises him to lower the gun because prolonged hand contact with the metal will ruin it. The officer screams in desperation to drop the gun as his frozen hand has lost all feeling. Our hero crouches beside Zach and asks what he thinks now, reminding him that he said he would never be caught. The playboy pleads for help, saying he's freezing and that if this continues, his legs will freeze solid too, but the protagonist just tells him to enjoy the apocalypse and leaves with Kyui. As they walk through the snow, people around them panic, shouting about the natural disaster that will freeze everyone. Already in winter clothes, Kyui says she can't believe it all came true, and he replies that this is just the beginning and the situation will only get worse. The girl then asks how long the ice apocalypse will last. With a serious expression, the young man replies that he doesn't know. He thinks that in his past life, the ice apocalypse had already lasted a full year with no sign of ending when he passed away. With chaos setting in, people start looting clothing stores. A man threatens to call the police, but another replies that they'll freeze without the clothes. QQ fears the collapse of social order, and the protagonist adds that not only order, but people's humanity will also be lost. Suddenly, two thugs with knives surround them and demand they hand over their clothes, but our hero stares at the men with a cold look and says they must have a death wish, telling them both to get lost. One of the thugs gets furious at his arrogance, and the other yells for his partner to attack him. One of them charges forward, but the protagonist knocks him out with a single, clean punch. The protagonist then pulls out a gun and points it at the head of the remaining thug, who is terrified. With the gun in hand, he ironically asks if he's still being arrogant. The thug panics and says he's not arrogant at all. In fact, he's very humble. With the situation resolved, the pair returns to the mansion now covered in snow. Already inside the house, the chubby friend excitedly celebrates the snow outside while they enjoy a delicious hot pot. During dinner, the protagonist warns everyone not to open the door for just anyone from now on. On TV, a news anchor announces an unknown cold wave worldwide and that the UN is urging everyone to maintain order. Looking at his phone, the protagonist smiles and says the chat group seems pretty lively. In the neighborhood chat, residents are panicking and wondering what's happening. Others comment that it's a natural disaster and advise everyone to stock up on supplies, but Aunt Lou joins the conversation and tells everyone to trust the government and not cause trouble by hoarding supplies. With a smile on his face, the protagonist continues to watch the chat on his phone. He then decides to join the conversation and sends a message advising everyone to stock up on plenty of supplies. Aunt Lou gets annoyed, calls him a punk, tells him to watch his mouth, and assures everyone the blizzard will end soon, but Gavin calls her an idiot. 3 days later, the snow continues to fall, and the chubby friend reports that the temperature outside has reached -60 degrees. Chuikui is worried because many people didn't have time to stock up on food. While his two friends are concerned, the protagonist continues to look at his phone with a smile on his face. In the group, a resident complains that the cold wave isn't stopping, and another calls out Aunt Lou on her promise. The woman replies that she's cold too and will organize the committee to investigate everyone's supply reserves. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door, and the protagonist asks who it is. Outside, Aunt Liu and two men say the community has come to bring warmth and tell him to open the door, but our hero refuses the offer and says with a smile that it's already quite warm inside. The woman introduces herself as a committee member and insists he open up, but the young man refuses because of the cold. Furious, Aunt Liu accuses him of defying the organization and yells for him to open the door immediately. She then boasts, saying it's good that he knows his place and has some self-awareness, and tells him to open the door, but the protagonist corrects her, saying he's not defying the organization, he's defying her, and calls her an idiot. Angrily, Aunt Liu calls him a scoundrel and says he's getting on her nerves. One of the men asks what to do now, and she decides to check the other houses first because she needs supplies for her grandson. Inside the mansion, the protagonist thinks that in just 3 days, the malicious nature of humankind has begun to show itself. At Xenia's mansion, her mother desperately complains that they only have food for 3 days and asks about Zack, but her daughter says the roads are blocked. The woman asks what they're going to do, and the redhead tells her not to worry because they still have money and can buy supplies. In the chat group, Xenia announces she's out of food and asks if anyone has anything to sell. A guy offers noodles and porridge. He says he has 3 pots of noodles and 5 cans of porridge. Xenia offers 50 and 80 for each, but he raises the price to 100 and 200. The redhead accepts the deal, tells him to bring the supplies, and says if anyone else wants to sell, they can contact her. Observing the conversation, the protagonist thinks that Xenia isn't dumb and new to buy supplies. At that moment, Chuki calls him for dinner. With a wicked smile, the young man thinks that in a few days, the supply sellers will regret it big time. 3 days later, the snow continues to fall, and the temperature plummets. At the 2 gold diggers' house, everyone is shivering from the cold as the temperature has dropped to -60 or 70 degrees. One of them asks Hunter what they're going to do now that the food is gone. Hunter then gets up and says he can't wait for his demise, calling everyone to go out and loot some things. One of the goons, looking at his phone, gets the purple-haired girl's attention when he sees a guy named Gavin and asks if it's the same one they were hunting. The girl confirms it's Gavin and is shocked to learn he lives in the same community. With a wicked smile, Hunter tells them to send a message to the guy and order him to bring food. Meanwhile, in the mansion's gym, the protagonist encourages Sixie to hold the position for half an hour to pass the test. The determined little girl replies that she will definitely pass. The chubby friend watches the scene and says Sixie is training so hard that he should start too. Gavin then suggests he train with Zixie and says his body cultivation technique might not be the best, but he'll be ahead of everyone if he starts now. A moment later, the chubby friend is already exhausted and yells that he can't take it anymore. Lying on the floor, he complains that it was too exhausting and that he needs a lobster to recover. Suddenly, the protagonist's phone vibrates and he receives a message. It was a message from one of Hunter's goons asking if he was Gavin and saying the boss ordered him to bring food. With a serious look, the protagonist observes the message, and then he replies with just one word, idiot. He then realizes the timeline has changed because in his past life, Hunter and his group didn't live in that community. At Hunter's house, one of the goons asks if Gavin has replied yet. The goon then reports that he did reply, and Hunter asks what he said. The goon reveals that Gavin called him an idiot, and he gets so furious that he spits out his drink. Angrily, the boss yells that the guy is asking for it, and orders his men to grab their weapons to go finish Gavin. Meanwhile, at Xenia's mansion, the situation isn't good either. Her mother complains that the food will run out in 2 days and asks about Zack. The redhead replies that he'll come to finish the protagonist. The woman then remembers that Gavin bought a lot of supplies before the apocalypse. The ex-girlfriend confirms, saying she remembers dozens of trucks delivering supplies to him nonstop. The woman wonders if he knew about the apocalypse, but the redhead thinks it's impossible because a simp like him would never know something that even the authorities didn't predict. With a wicked smile, the mother suggests that if Zack can't come soon, they shouldn't let Gavin's supplies go to waste. The daughter agrees and tells her mother not to worry because she knows exactly how to make a simp like him bring the supplies personally. Outside the mansion, Hunter and his armed goons arrive, and one of them points to the house, saying Gavin lives there. Inside the house, the chubby friend sees the intruders on the monitor and warns that there are people outside, but our hero calms him down and tells him not to panic because it's just Hunter and his group. The boss then yells at the door, telling Gavin to open up immediately. With his arms crossed, the protagonist replies that they're not welcome and tells them all to get lost. Hunter gets annoyed and threatens to break down the door, saying it will be too late for him to beg for mercy then. The protagonist mocks the guy's full mouth and says he'll wash it out for him. He then presses a button and a jet of ice cold water hits the intruders, who scream from the cold. One of the goons complains that he can't move, but the boss orders them to break down the door and finish the guy, but they can't stand the cold and flee, dropping their weapons, while Hunter promises that Gavin will regret this. Inside, the chubby friend laughs at the scene on the monitor and celebrates that the scumbags are going to freeze solid. 7 days after the apocalypse, the protagonist announces they're going out at night, but his chubby friend doesn't understand why. With a mysterious smile, the young man reveals that it's almost time for more meteors to fall. Yahello gets all excited about the meteor shower and says they can't miss it, but but suddenly the protagonist's phone vibrates. Picking up the device, he's surprised to see a message from Xenia and wonders why she's messaging him. The redhead asks if he's there and says she wants to talk to him. The chubby friend sees the message, grabs the phone, and yells that she's an idiot and there's nothing to talk about. In the other mansion, the girl's mother asks if Gavin has replied yet. The redhead, full of confidence, tells her mother not to worry because he must be happy with her message and will surely reply. But half an hour passes and there's no reply. The girl then panics and wonders why that scumbag Gavin still hasn't replied to her. At Hunter's house, everyone is shivering from the cold and complaining they need more fire. The boss complains that he almost froze solid and that the weather outside isn't fit for humans. Angrily, he promises that next time they'll break down Gavin's door and throw him in the snow to freeze. In the other mansion, Xenia's mother asks if Gavin has replied after 2 hours, and the girl says no. The woman suggests he's still angry, and her daughter decides to send a voice message, sure that he'll love it. With a seductive voice, she asks what Gavin is doing and if he's okay with the change in weather. Upon receiving the voice message, our protagonist is surprised, and with a smile, he decides to play her game since he's bored. He then replies to the message asking if she's missing her daddy. The redhead and her mother celebrate the reply. The girl boasts that he's still the same old simp, and her mother suggests she ask for food, but upon hearing the protagonist's reply, the girl is shocked by the question. Angrily, she throws her phone on the floor and curses that scumbag Gavin. In the neighborhood group chat, a resident regrets selling his food, and another blames Aunt Lou for telling them not to stock up. The woman then announces that the committee will go to every house to collect excess food for even distribution. The protagonist realizes that Aunt Lou is trying to trick everyone into stealing their supplies but doubts anyone will fall for it. The chubby friend reports that it's completely dark outside. The protagonist then says it's time and tells everyone to get ready to go out. He thinks that although he's sure the meteor will fall in the complex, he doesn't know the exact location, and more people increase the chance of finding it. Once outside, the group comments that it's the first time they've been out since the apocalypse and that it's freezing. The protagonist warns that 2 meteors will fall and tells everyone to stay alert and dive for one as soon as they spot it. Suddenly, they see Aunt Lou and her men announcing that the committee is collecting supplies and asking for everyone's cooperation. The woman complains that the food from last time ran out and that her grandson is hungry again. The chubby friend gets annoyed and calls Aunt Lou shameless. One of the men warns her that Gavin is just ahead. With a wicked smile, the old woman says to go, because last time he didn't open the door, but now they've finally caught him. The group then surrounds the protagonist and his friends, and Aunt Lou yells for him to stop. The young man turns and asks if there's a problem. The woman accuses him of hoarding several truckloads of supplies in his house. With a confident smile, the protagonist confirms that it's true. Aunt Lou celebrates that things just got easy and demands that he move all his supplies to the neighborhood committee. The protagonist asks why he should hand over his supplies, and Aunt Lou says it's an order from the committee and he should set an example. But the young man cuts her off and says his supplies are none of her business. The old woman questions if he has any intention of improving. With an ironic smile, our hero asks who she is to lecture him, and if it's any of her business whether he improves or not. The woman gets annoyed and condemns him in the name of the committee, but the protagonist ignores her and tells his group it's time to leave. Aunt Lee's men try to stop them with shovels, yelling for them not to move. The woman then threatens him, saying not to even think about leaving if he doesn't hand over the supplies. Suddenly, the chubby friend gets angry and slaps Aunt Lou across the face. Lying on the ground, she yells that he dared to hit her and orders her men to arrest them. At that moment, Zixi points to the sky and yells that the meteor has arrived. The protagonist then yells for everyone to go get the meteor. The men try to stop them, but the protagonist knocks them down with a punch and tells them to get lost. The chubby friend rushes towards one of the meteors, celebrating that his big opportunity has arrived, and then he dives towards the golden light falling from the sky. Meanwhile, Jixi also spots the other meteor and prepares to receive it. The chubby friend is shocked to realize the meteor is flying towards Sixi on its own. The meteor then hits the girl head on, completely enveloping her in a golden energy. Seeing the scene, Kyuki runs worriedly to Sixi and asks if she's okay. The young girl then stands up and tells her that she's fine, and that it seems the meteor entered her body. Suddenly, Kyuki points to the sky and yells that another meteor is coming. Without wasting time, the protagonist tells everyone to run after the meteor. Lying on the ground, Aunt Lou yells for them to stop, accusing them of assaulting an elderly woman and trying to run away. But the meteor hits the ground with a blast of light that throws everyone back. The chubby friend wonders why that meteor landed, and Gavin explains that the ones that hit the ground are special items. They then approach the crater, and Yaniel points to a glowing object that looks like amber. Our protagonist picks up the object and identifies it as red spiritual fluid, something extremely precious. He continues to explain that the item's greatest effect is to greatly increase the cold resistance of whoever consumes it. Everyone gets excited about the discovery, and the protagonist says it's time to head back to the mansion. But Aunt Lou and her goons surround them, demanding money and instant noodles as compensation. The young man just gives them a disdainful look and calls them idiots. One of the men says he's challenging their authority, and the woman decides decides to collect supplies from other houses first to deal with him later. Back at the mansion, the TV reports that the ice disaster is global and the government is initiating rescue operations. Suddenly, the power goes out and the chubby friend panics as he sees the TV turn off, but the protagonist calmly flips a switch, says it's normal as the power grid is overloaded, and assures them they have enough power for 100 years. Looking out the window, Juki worries that without power, survival will be more difficult and wonders how many people will perish. Yahello advises her not to be naive, as they can't save everyone in this apocalypse, and the girl agrees. The protagonist then changes the subject and asks Sixie how she's feeling after the meteor entered her body. The little girl replies with a smile that she doesn't feel much, just that she feels a lot lighter than before. Gavin is confused by the answer and asks if that's all, and she confirms excitedly. To test the new ability, the chubby friend tells Sixie to try the body strengthening technique that Gavin taught her. Our guy observes the girl and notices that her physical constitution hasn't improved at all, concluding that the ability has nothing to do with physical strength. Given this, he asks if any new memories have appeared in her mind, like sword techniques or fireball spells, but she says no. Finding it all very strange, Gavin decides they'll have to figure out what ability the little girl has awakened over time. With that settled, he gathers the group and says to divide the spiritual fluid so they won't have to worry about the cold outside anymore. Yahello then takes his share and drinks the reddish liquid in one go. He feels a warm current run through his body, and the protagonist explains that although it won't completely block the cold, they won't freeze even if they stay naked outside for a while. Meanwhile, in the other mansion, Xenia's mother complains that she's freezing without heat since the power went out. The redhead tries to calm her mother, saying the power should be back soon, but the woman despairs, thinking they won't make it if Zack doesn't arrive soon. Xenia gets furious and assures her that Zack is almost recovered, and as soon as he arrives, the first thing they'll do is finish that scumbag Gavin. Suddenly, Xenia's mother notices something wrong out the window, and the redhead asks what happened. The woman then points to Gavin's house and asks why his lights are still on while everyone else is in the dark. With that, the woman realizes that the young man was very well prepared and had his own power generation equipment. The redhead freaks out with anger, unable to believe her ex-boyfriend is living so well in the middle of the apocalypse. The mother then tells her daughter to contact Gavin again to see what they can get out of him. The girl then sends a message with a seductive tone, asking what he's up to since the power is out for everyone. The scene then shows the protagonist's mansion, all lit up and warm amidst the blizzard. Our protagonist receives the message and, with a smile, realizes that Xenia is in trouble and has come looking for him again. For fun, he decides to take a picture of the table full of food to show how well he's living. Upon receiving the notification, the two get excited to see what Gavin replied. The young man then sends the picture of the feast and says he was bored and decided to prepare a table full of food. The two of them drool at the sight of lobster, steak, and ribs in the photo, and the mother comments that she would pass away happy with just one bite. Seeing that, the older woman tells her daughter to get food from Gavin, no matter what. The girl then sends another message asking how he still has so much food when they've already eaten everything they had. Suddenly, the phone beeps again, and the two celebrate that he replied once more, but the protagonist simply replies that he gets it and is going to eat now. No more talk. Angrily, the redhead throws her phone on the floor and yells that Gavin is doing this on purpose just to annoy her. Lying on the sofa, our hero looks at his phone and thinks that the neighbors are also starting to lose their patience. In the neighborhood group chat, a man says he's starving and is going out to look for food, but another warns him that the snow is very deep. Lying comfortably, the protagonist thinks that going out now is suicide as the temperature outside is reaching -90 degrees. The man then decides to go alone, and the others wish him good luck, while a fortune teller advises him not to risk it. Meanwhile, at Hunter's house, the goons complain that the food has run out and they won't last much longer. The two gold diggers beg the boss to come up with a plan and find a way to get food, as they can't just wait to perish. Hunter gets up and says it's too dangerous to leave the neighborhood at the moment. With a wicked smile, he reveals his plan to rob Aunt Lou first, since she's been collecting supplies from the committee. In her house, the woman feeds her grandson with the food she got from other houses. The selfish boy tells his grandmother not to eat because the food is all his. The old woman agrees and encourages him to eat a little more to be full. Suddenly, loud knocks on the door interrupt their dinner, and the woman gets annoyed and asks who's knocking. On the other side of the door, Hunter and his armed goons tell her to open the door immediately. The woman is terrified and wonders why the thug Hunter is at her door. Outside, the group's leader threatens to break down the door if she doesn't open it immediately. Desperate, Aunt Lou tells her grandson to hide all the food they managed to get. Out of patience, Hunter and his men kick the door down with all their might and storm the house. Upon entering, one of the goons points to the food, and the grandson tries to protect the supplies with his arms wide open. With a wicked smile, the gang leader orders his men to take everything they can find. The old woman tries to stop them, saying she's the head of the neighborhood committee and that this is illegal, but Hunter scoffs at her, reminding her that she just stole that food from the other residents. One of the goons shoves the woman aside while carrying a box of supplies. Furious, Aunt Lou yells that she'll fight all of them to protect the food. Another goon throws her to the ground and tells the old lady to get lost. The spoiled grandson tries to stop one of the men, yelling that the food is all his and that he'll finish them in the name of the light. The goon gets annoyed with the brat and slaps him across the face. The grandmother screams in desperation as she sees her beloved grandson being assaulted right in front of her. After taking the food, Hunter decides they can't leave empty-handed and orders them to take the wooden furniture to use as firewood. His men praise him for the brilliant idea. On the cold floor, Aunt Lou yells at the thugs while hugging her grandson, accusing them of trying to ruin the boy's life. Elsewhere, Xenia's mother advises her not to be angry and to try acting cute, as men are weaker when a woman acts that way. The girl then sends a message to the protagonist, saying it's been a long time, that she misses him, and asking if she can come see him. To her surprise, Gavin replies with just an okay. With a victorious smile, the redhead celebrates with her mother, saying they're finally going to eat well, and boasts that her ex is still a simp who does whatever she wants. With that, the two go to the young man's mansion and the girl knocks on the door, telling him to open up because it's her. But inside, the protagonist just ignores the knocking and continues playing his video game, asking who's at the door. Outside, Xenia identifies herself all excited. The young man then feigns surprise and asks what she's doing there. Shivering from the cold, the redhead says she came to see him and begs him to open the door because she's freezing. Without taking his eyes off the game, the protagonist asks why he should open the door and who told them to come over. Annoyed, the girl yells that he was the one who told her to come because he replied okay to her message. With a mocking smile, the young man says she must have misread it and tells her to check the message again. Confused, the redhead takes out her phone to check the conversation and is shocked to see that the full reply was okay in your dreams. Furious, Xenia asks if Gavin is messing with her and if he's going to open the door. With a mocking smile, the protagonist simply replies that he's not opening it. Annoyed, the redhead kicks the door with all her might, swearing she'll get her revenge and make him meet a horrible end. Her mother despairs because they can't even get into the house and wonders how they'll get revenge. The girl then decides to expose Gavin to Aunt Liu and the neighborhood committee for hoarding supplies. At Aunt Liu's house, the grandson complains that he's cold and hungry, and his grandmother assures him that nothing will happen to him. The old woman promises she'll find something for her grandson to eat immediately. Suddenly, her phone starts ringing with a call from Xenia. The redhead reports Gavin for hoarding supplies and asks Aunt Liu to bring him to justice and punish him. In the neighborhood group chat, a resident asks if the guy who went out for food has returned, and the fortune teller says the situation must be bad because he's vanished. The man reappears and says he almost met his end out there and can't feel one of his legs anymore. Another resident concludes it's better to starve than to go out. Lying in bed, our hero watches the conversation and thinks that the true test of humanity has finally arrived. He then notices a new message in the group. Aunt Liu tags Gavin and asks what he's going to do about his stockpile of supplies. The other residents are surprised and start asking for medicine. The protagonist realizes that Aunt Liu is trying to turn the entire complex against him to force him to submit and hand over his supplies. In the neighborhood group chat, Aunt Liu pressures him to hand over his supplies, accusing him of lacking compassion and not behaving like a college student. She ends up convincing the neighbors who were also in need. As he reads the messages, the protagonist remembers that in his past life, his kindness was exploited and his food was stolen, and he vows not to make the same mistake. Furious with the young man's silence, the woman threatens him, saying she'll throw paint on his door and curse him every day, and calls on all residents to go to Gavin's house and take his supplies by force. In the mansion's kitchen, the chubby friend finishes a call with his father, saying he understands and that they don't need to worry. Our hero approaches with a cup of coffee and asks what's going on. His friend explains that his father just called and said chaos has broken out outside, with looting and robbery everywhere. The protagonist calmly sips his coffee and says it's normal and that the situation will only get more chaotic. The chubby friend worries about his parents, fearing their house might be invaded despite the supplies they stocked up. Gavin asks if he wants to go see them. His friend confirms, saying that now that he's drunk the spiritual fluid, the cold outside is no longer a threat to him. With a smile, the young man agrees to go with him, saying he has a snowmobile that will make the trip much easier. Suddenly, knocks on the door interrupt their conversation, and they look at each other with serious expressions. On the security cameras, they see Aunt Liu and a large group of residents. The protagonist comments that she's quite persistent. Outside, the residents are surprised to see that Gavin's house has power, and one of them points to the steam rising from the roof, indicating it's very warm inside. Aunt Liu, with a greedy smile, comments that Gavin must have a lot of supplies and that if he contributes a little, everyone will be saved. Seeing this, the protagonist says those people are there for food, but they can keep dreaming. Outside, Aunt Liu demands demands that Gavin hand over his supplies for distribution, saying it's a unanimous decision by all residents. Through the security camera, the young man scoffs and asks if that small group represents all the residents now. The woman gets worked up, saying that as the director of the committee, she does represent them and demands he open the door. With a defiant smile, the protagonist refuses to open up and tells them to come in themselves if they're able. Aunt Lu says she knew he wouldn't open up and reveals they brought a locksmith, telling Old Lai to pick the lock. The other residents celebrate the idea, already dreaming of a warm room and delicious food. The locksmith tries to open the door but can't, saying he's never seen a lock like that before and that it's a special multi-layered lock. Inside, the protagonist laughs at the idiots, thinking that his door's security is comparable to a bank vault's. Aunt Lu gets annoyed with the delay, and the locksmith tries again with another tool, but it's no use. Tired of playing games, the protagonist tells Yahello to turn on the power to the door, and his friend obeys instantly. The locksmith then gets a violent electric shock and falls to the ground. Furious, Aunt Lu yells that Gavin electrified the door. Not giving up, the woman orders Plan B and tells everyone to break down the door with a wooden log. She then yells with all her might for them to break down the door once and for all. With a loud crash, the residents slam the log against the door but fail to break it. Through the security camera, the chubby friend complains that they are so shameless and don't understand that the supplies aren't theirs. The protagonist comments that the apocalypse is a test of character, and some would rather perish than do bad things, while others would rather take lives to survive. Outside, one of the residents collapses on the ground, exhausted, saying he can't go on. All the others also fall down tired, and one of them reveals that the door is made of a special alloy and they won't be able to break it. With a wicked smile, our hero says they're tired and that now it's their turn to give the invaders something disgusting. The chubby friend excitedly presses a button and says here comes the surprise. Aunt Lu yells for them not to rest and to keep ramming the door, as she refuses to believe they can't break it. Suddenly, a stream of a brown, disgusting liquid is sprayed from above, hitting the woman head on. All the residents are hit and wonder what that disgusting stuff is. Furious, Aunt Lu yells at Gavin, asking how he dares to throw water on them, but the others realize it's not water because it stinks badly, and one of them complains that it's a mix of human waste. Watching the scene through the camera, the protagonist laughs and tells the old idiot to keep cursing because they have plenty more waste to throw. Cold and stinking, the residents give up and leave, cursing Aunt Lu for convincing them to go there. At Hunter's house, one of the gold diggers reports that Aunt Lu's attack failed and that everyone came back drenched in waste. Hunter comments that Gavin has a few tricks up his sleeve and that his defenses are very good. The gold digger with glasses says this proves he has a large stockpile of supplies. The other gold digger agrees, saying they can't leave him alone and that if they manage to break into his house, the food he has will be enough for everyone to without worries. The group leader says he has a history with the guy and will definitely finish him, and that they just need to prepare in advance. In the other mansion, Xenia's mother despairs, saying Aunt Lu's group failed and that she's freezing. The girl then decides to call Zach again. The playboy answers the phone annoyed and asks why she's calling again. The redhead begs him to come get her because she's freezing, but Zach tells her to get lost, saying he can't even save himself at the moment, and hangs up on her. The mother panics and wonders if Zach has abandoned them, but her daughter says he must be in trouble too. The woman despairs, thinking they're going to perish, and decides to go out to find food, but the redhead stops her, saying they'll perish even faster if they go out. Desperate, the girl wonders what they can do since they can't just wait for their demise. The mother then suggests she keep begging Gavin, as he's the only one who can save them now. The scene then returns to the protagonist's mansion. He receives a message from Xenia admitting she was wrong and asking what she needs to do for him to forgive her. With a wicked smile, the young man simply replies for her to call him daddy. Reading the message, Xenia gets furious and wonders what's gotten into Gavin. Her mother complains that the young man is taking his jokes too far. The older woman then encourages her daughter to call him daddy, as she has nothing to lose. She yells that there are no more buts and that dignity is worthless when it comes to survival. With a determined look, the redhead decides to play his game to trick him and teach him a lesson once she's inside the house. She then sends the message, daddy, and the protagonist receives it with a satisfied smile. The two celebrate, thinking that Gavin will finally let them in, but he replies mockingly that he doesn't have a rebellious daughter like her. Furious, the girl freaks out and starts calling the protagonist every name in the book. Meanwhile, Hunter gathers his men, and one of them confirms that everything is ready and that they'll definitely get the guy this time. The boss then gives the order, and the group of thugs goes on the attack. They then walk towards the protagonist's mansion. The chubby friend sees the intruders on the security camera and warns that Hunter and his gang are here again. With a confident smile, our hero says that this time they'll make them regret it, so they don't think they're easy to bully. Outside, the gang leader yells and gives Gavin a chance to open the door. The protagonist simply calls him an idiot with a mocking smile. Outside, Hunter warns that the guy's chance is up and orders his men to pile firewood at the door. With the firewood in place, the gang leader orders his goons to pour gasoline and burn the guy alive. The chubby friend gets desperate and says the scumbags are trying to burn the house down, but the protagonist calms him down, saying the mansion is made of fireproof materials. With a wicked smile, Hunter throws a lighter onto the firewood and tells Gavin to wait to be burned alive. A large bonfire forms in front of the mansion's door. After a while, one of the goons comments that there's no movement inside. Another goon notices that the house is made of fireproof materials and that the fire caused no damage. Furious, Hunter orders his men to get the impact drill to make a hole in the wall. One of the goons excitedly grabs the drill and says he'll do the job. With the drill in hand, he starts drilling into the wall, and the boss encourages him to continue. Little Sixie gets scared and warns that there are bad men breaking the wall, but the protagonist reassures her, saying they won't be able to get in. With a determined smile, our hero announces that it's hunting time and calls for Yahello to begin. The two friends grab bows and arrows, and the chubby friend comments that it's his first time using one. The protagonist says it won't be a problem hitting targets at close range. He thinks that with the apocalypse, many supernatural things will appear, and some will render firearms useless, so it's necessary to practice with a bow and arrow. The goon finally breaks through the wall, and Hunter asks how he did it. But the man says something's wrong, and the boss asks what happened. He then reveals that he can't drill any deeper, because there's something inside the wall. Looking through the hole, they discover it's a steel plate and realize that Gavin has reinforced the entire house. Furious, Hunter wonders how they're going to get in if it's impossible to break the wall. Suddenly, an arrow hits one of the goons, knocking him to the ground. Then, several arrows start flying, hitting the other men, and the boss yells for everyone to take cover. Angrily, Hunter swears that if he doesn't finish Gavin, he'll change his name. He is then hit by an arrow and screams in pain. The goons help him escape and run back to their house. Those left behind beg not to be abandoned and plead to be saved. Watching the scene, the protagonist comments that 3 were left behind and the rest fled. The chubby friend asks what they're going to do with the 3 injured men, but the protagonist reassures him, saying that without medicine, they won't last long. The injured goons beg not to be taken out, saying it was Hunter who forced them, but the protagonist just ignores them and calls his friend to go back inside the mansion. The chubby friend asks why the protagonist let them escape. Gavin then explains that Hunter would never come back for his men and that in the freezing weather, they would freeze solid in about 10 minutes. With a smile, Yahello understands the plan and says that since the gang leader was also injured, he wouldn't come back, which would cause a fight within his group. Meanwhile, one of the abandoned goons is relieved and comments that luckily the guy didn't finish them off. But another thug despairs, realizing they are badly injured in the cold and won't last long, and tells his buddy to call Hunter. Desperate, the man calls his boss and begs him to come back and save them. On the other end of the line, Hunter asks where they are. The goon replies that they are still in front of Gavin's house, but the call is disconnected at that moment. The other thug asks what the boss said, and the guy with the phone replies, shocked, that Hunter hung up on him. One of the goons gets furious, realizing that the boss abandoned them to freeze. He then explodes with anger and curses Hunter for leaving him to perish after he risked his life for him. One of the men despairs, saying their only hope of survival now is to beg Gavin for help. With that, the 3 turn towards the mansion and start screaming for help, promising to become the protagonist's slaves if he saves them. Back at Hunter's house, the boss screams in pain and tells someone to pull the arrow out of his back. One of his men yanks the arrow out at once and the boss screams in pain. Watching the scene, the 2 gold diggers comment that Hunter failed once again and admit they completely misjudged Gavin. Lying on the sofa in great pain, Hunter yells at the 2 girls to stop staring and go boil some water to clean his wound. The 2 then try to calm the boss down, telling him not to worry because they'll take care of everything. In the kitchen, the one with glasses asks her friend what they're going to do, as it's obvious Hunter is no match for Gavin. The purple-haired one agrees, saying they need a plan B and that they can't put all their hopes in the boss. Desperate, the other gold digger says there's no other way, as they have no food and are trapped, unable to leave. The purple-haired one then realizes that the safest place in the neighborhood at that moment is Gavin's mansion. The one with glasses is hesitant, reminding her that they have a bad history with the guy, but her friend reassures her, saying that if they apologize, he wouldn't let them perish. Meanwhile, the protagonist and his friend get ready to leave with 2 snowmobiles. The chubby friend celebrates how much easier it makes getting around in the snow. With that, our hero puts on his helmet and says they're going to check on how Yahello's parents are doing. From her mansion window, Xinya's mother sees the 2 leaving and points out in shock that Gavin has a snowmobile and is taking off. Furious, the redhead vows to take everything the protagonist has and finish him once and for all. With the snowmobiles, the 2 friends travel through the snow, which is already over 6 feet deep. Suddenly, the protagonist spots a supermarket and calls his friend to check it out. The 2 then enter the place, but they discover that the supermarket has been completely looted and there's nothing left. Our protagonist explains that this is normal, as it's been almost a month since the apocalypse and everyone's food has run out. Suddenly, the chubby friend yells for him to watch out. With a quick reflex, the young man turns and lands a kick on the guy who tried to attack him from behind. Yahello pulls out a gun and points it at the man on the floor, calling him a scumbag for trying a sneak attack. The man on the floor begs them not to shoot, saying he had no choice choice because he has a family to feed. The chubby friend is surprised to hear the word family. The man then calls his family to come out of hiding, and a pregnant woman with a child appears. The woman and her 2 young children join the man. He explains that his wife is pregnant. They've already eaten all the food in the place, and they had nothing else to do. Gavin then questions why he attacked instead of simply asking for help. The man is speechless, not knowing what to say to the protagonist. The woman and children get on their knees and beg them to let them go in peace. Suddenly, our hero calls Yahello and tells him to come with him. As they walk down one of the aisles, the chubby friend asks what that strange smell is. Our guy then replies seriously that it's the smell of blood, and his friend is startled. Upon arriving at the location, the chubby friend is completely horrified to see 2 bloody skeletons on the floor, but our hero stares at the scene without any emotion and says it's exactly what he thought. The chubby friend can't handle it and starts to throw up. After recovering, Yahello gets furious and vows to finish those scumbags. The protagonist then questions how he plans to get revenge, asking if he's going to finish the pregnant woman and the children too. But his friend yells that he'll only take out the man. With that, Gavin explains that if he does that, the woman and the 2 children will have no chance of surviving on their own. Desperate, the chubby friend punches the protagonist's shoulder and yells that that family of animals survived by feeding on their own kind. Our guy then explains that in the apocalypse, there will always be people who cross the line, and that things like this will become more and more common. With that, the 2 leave the supermarket behind and continue their journey to Yahello's parents' house. Upon arriving, our hero notices that the front gate is open, and the chubby friend panics and starts shouting for his parents. Inside, a group of thugs celebrates finding all the supplies, saying the old folks hid a lot of stuff. The group's leader, all excited, celebrates the success of the raid and promises an extra chicken leg for everyone on the way back. One of the goons then asks the boss what they should do with the 2 old folks. With a wicked smile, the gang leader orders his men to finish them all. The spiky-haired goon then points his gun at Yahello's parents and prepares to shoot. Suddenly, the chubby friend bursts into the house and desperately yells for the thug to stop. Seeing her son, the chubby friend's mother screams in desperation and tells him to run away from that place. But the blonde thug doesn't even care and shoots the woman without any mercy. Seeing the scene, Yahello panics and screams his mother's name in complete desperation. To protect his son, the chubby friend's father lunges at the blonde thug and tells the boy to run. Annoyed, the goon shoots the old man several times at point-blank range. The protagonist's friend screams in despair as he sees his parents lying on the floor. The blonde thug then points his gun at the chubby friend and says he's going to send the whole family to the other side. But before he could shoot, the protagonist appears and cuts the thug's hand off. The blonde goon screams in pain as he sees his hand flying through the air. Seeing the scene, the other thugs turn to the protagonist and ask who he is. With a cold look, our hero replies that he's the Reaper and plunges the knife into the blonde's chest. The gang leader gets furious and orders his goons to finish the intruder. 2 of the goons then charge at the protagonist, shouting that he's going to meet his end. But our guy is faster, and with a swift move, he disarms the man. The gang leader and the other goon are shocked by the protagonist's speed. Seeing the protagonist's arrival, one of the blue-haired goons panics and yells for everyone to run. But our hero is much faster and lands a fatal blow on the thug's back. With his face stained with blood, the young man threatens the survivors, saying that whoever moves will become dog food. Seeing that, the gang leader and the other goon kneel on the floor and beg to be spared. The chubby friend ignores the thugs and rushes desperately to his parents' side. To his surprise, his mother was still alive and says she's happy he's okay, but the chubby friend's father was in critical condition, and with his last words, he warns him to be careful of someone named Lisanchin from Mang village. Shortly after, both of Yahello's parents don't make it, leaving him completely devastated. Filled with hatred, the chubby friend turns to the protagonist and tells him to leave the thugs to him. He then grabs a knife and lunges at the gang leader, but the protagonist stops him. The gang leader gets desperate and begs not to be taken out, as he was just following orders, but the chubby friend doesn't care and grabs him by the collar, telling him to go to heck. However, the protagonist stops him once again from finishing the thug. With a cold look, our hero asks who sent them, and the man reveals it was the chief of Mang village. The young man then becomes thoughtful upon hearing the name of the Mang village chief. With the image of the village chief in his head, Yahello reveals that his father once sponsored Mang village and that Lisanchin even worked for him. The thug then boasts that Mang village is the greatest power in the region and no one can mess with them. Our protagonist scoffs and says he can dream on about being let go. The goon gets annoyed and threatens the young man, saying that Mang village will find him and won't let him escape. Not caring about the threats, Gavin tears the thug's clothes off. The man is shocked and wonders what the protagonist is doing. Our hero says that finishing him would be too easy and that a guy like him deserves to freeze slowly. The thug begs for mercy, but the young man ignores him and with a kick tells the scumbag to get lost. Outside, the man pleads for a quick end, but it was too late, and in a few seconds he freezes completely in the middle of the snow. With the thug out of the way, Yahello turns to the protagonist and says he wants revenge and that they need to go to Mang village. They then then arrive at Mang Village and find several bodies hanging at the entrance. The protagonist comments that the people of Mang Village have built a fortress there. The chubby friend gets annoyed and says those people have committed countless crimes. Suddenly, two guys on snowmobiles appear and approach the pair. The protagonist and his friend are surprised to see this, and the young man comments that Mang Village also has snowmobiles. The guy with the mohawk then asks who they are. Our guy replies that they came as guests, but the thug doesn't believe him. With a smile, Gavin reveals that the invitation came from the village chief, Lee Sanchin. The two get annoyed by the lie and reveal that the chief was invited by Zaiwei Biotech and isn't even there. Then, they draw their weapons, but both are hit by clean headshots. Our protagonist then appears with a gun in hand and finishes them both without hesitation. Suddenly, a voice shouts from the top of the fortress, asking who's there. Seeing the bodies, the guards get furious and wonder where this punk who dares to cause trouble in Mang Village came from. Daniel then suggests they head back for now and think of a new plan, and the protagonist agrees with the idea. With that, the two flee on their snowmobiles while the thugs shoot and yell for them not to run. The pair then returns to the mansion, where a group of people is waiting for them outside. It was Hunter's abandoned goons who celebrate the young man's return as they were freezing. The protagonist then wonders why there are so many people there. The men ask if the protagonist got anything from his trip and if he brought supplies from the supermarket. Annoyed, the yeoman tells everyone to get out of his way. One of the men says that Gavin went to look for supplies for them and asks if he found anything. The protagonist questions who said he went to look for supplies for them. The same man then asks what he was doing out there, if he wasn't looking for food for the group. Our hero says it's none of their business and shoves him aside. The man gets annoyed and accuses him of having no respect for his elders, calling him rude. A woman then asks if he found supplies, saying they are about to starve, but the protagonist replies that he found nothing. The woman doesn't believe him and demands that he let her search him. Out of patience, our hero shoves her away and tells her to get lost. The chubby friend then speaks up and tells everyone that they found nothing and they didn't go out looking for them. One of the women complains that they won't last long without food, and another guy says they'll take the snowmobiles and search on their own. The protagonist scoffs at the audacity, saying they are so shameless. The woman then asks Gavin to give them food, since everyone says he has a lot stocked up at home. All the others agree and demand that he share the supplies, threatening to stay at his door until he gives in. Out of patience, the protagonist says he can't be bothered with them and calls his friend to go inside the mansion, but a woman holds him back and yells that he can't leave without leaving food for the group. Annoyed, the young man shoves her hard, sending her to the ground. Lying in the snow, the woman throws a tantrum, accuses him of assaulting a woman, and threatens to curse him every day if he doesn't give her 10 packs of noodles. The other residents get involved, saying Gavin went too far by assaulting a woman. The shameless woman then demands that the protagonist apologize and help her into the house to recover. With a dark expression, our hero extends his hand to the woman. With a victorious smile, the woman prepares to accept his help and already demands a delicious meal, but instead of helping her, the protagonist slaps her right across the face. The woman is shocked by his action and asks what he's doing. With a wicked smile, the young man says she accused him of assaulting her, and now he's just fulfilling her wish. He then begins to beat up the woman lying on the ground. She begs him to stop hitting her, but the protagonist couldn't care less. Gavin then asks if she thinks he'll stop just because she asked. Desperate, the woman screams for help from the other residents as her face becomes completely swollen from the beating.